There. Hello everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Global Azure Norway. My name is Oddmund Bakke, and I will be the host for this session by Peter Örneholm. Peter is an IT consultant and Microsoft AI MVP who loves to explore life, and using the power of Azure is his passion. Peter has over 10 years of experience in Microsoft-related technologies and currently works as an IT consultant at Active Solutions in Stockholm, helping companies achieve more using modern cloud and web technologies. Peter's sessions is going to be Azure Form Recognizer, the next level of OCR. So without further ado, I give the word over to Peter.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here at Global Azure Norway. Let me just get back to my initial presentation here. Thank you for inviting me to speaking at this event and be able to share my passion about the cloud and Azure and especially AI. So as you mentioned, this session will be about Form Recognizer, the next level of OCR. Just a quick word about me. As you mentioned, my name is Peter Örneholm. I live in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. I work as an IT consultant at Active Solution in Stockholm. I'm a Microsoft AI MVP. I awarded that for 2 years, I think, and before that I was an Azure MVP for a couple of years. I run the Stockholm Azure user group, and I live with my family quite close to Stockholm. And I work for Active Solution, as mentioned. We are IT consultants in Stockholm and Sweden, or actually not only Stockholm anymore. We are all over Sweden and working with really interesting projects related to the cloud and AI. But enough about me and us. Let's dive into the agenda for today. At first, we'll look at an introduction, and then there will be loads of demos, and there will be time for questions at the end. So not that much more, but look, you will be able to look forward to quite a lot of hands-on demos on how to do this stuff. So speaking about introduction, as mentioned, I'm working with Azure and machine learning and AI in Azure. And in Azure, you could say that there are different layers or levels about Azure machine learning. So kind of the fundamental stuff you can run on Azure machine learning. You could use the GPUs available in Azure, and you can train your own models with your language of choice and so on. But you need to provide data. You have kind of understanding on how to run these things. But Azure will provide you with the infrastructure to train your models and with tooling around that. On top of that, we have what's called Azure Cognitive Services, which is categorized into language, vision, decision, and speech. It's services for custom scenarios tailored toward developers. When you want to translate the text, when you want to find out what's in an image, if you want to take decision about anomalies in data sets, or if you want to do speech to text or text to speech. Basically, kind of APIs available for you to take data and get insights out of them. On top of that, we have more specific scenarios. So, for example, if you want to find out what's in a document, if you want to do with cognitive search, if you want to do data mining and get insight into large volumes of data, if you want to use video analyzer to get info and insights into video streams, for example. And as mentioned, Azure Form Recognizer are one of these services within the Azure Applied AI Services category. And with Azure Form Recognizer, we are able to do OCR on the next level. And you might be thinking, we have had OCR for ages. I'm not sure about you, but when I grew up in Sweden, these devices were available to buy. I never had one myself, but I know I was always seeing them pop by in the stores. I think the idea was that you could use this pen to capture text from books, or you could kind of scan the books using this device. But OCR have, of course, or the technologies to do OCR have evolved quite a lot since. And today the things you need to scan are much more complicated. So in the best of worlds, we need to scan text that's written in English, that's kind of a black on a white paper, written by a computer, and kind of everything is optimal. But in reality, we usually have much more complicated data sets. We might need to scan an image of a newspaper written with different fonts, written in columns, written in maybe different languages, and also it might be handwritten, for example. So even in the kind of simplest scenario where you just want to extract text, there are quite different scenarios. And we'll get back to kind of the enhancement of this. And just to get kind of that sorted, we'll look at Form Recognizer today. And some of the key features I've mentioned is that Form Recognizer supports quite a lot of languages. When I last looked at the image, it was 164 supported languages. It supports handwritten text extraction in 9 of those languages. And another thing is that it doesn't require language, it does, or rather does language identification itself. So you don't need to specify, here is a document written in Swedish, here is a document written in English. You could just say, here's a document. If you find text in it, please tell me what language it's written in. And it even supports mixed languages. And next up, you have the support for natural reading order, and I will demo this soon, that it's actually able to figure out, okay, here's a newspaper. What's the most relevant order on extracting text on this page? So given that we have a service that can do all of this technical stuff, which is kind of, a lot of tick in the box, we need to support these features, but what can it actually do then? Yeah, and as I mentioned, we have had OCR for some time, and even though this is a better OCR, what Form Recognizer really adds to the game is that it supports understanding documents and understanding forms, so to say. For example, a common scenario is that you have a receipt. You are about to hand in that receipt to your company and enter it into your kind of company system, so to say, to get money back from your company. And in this document, there are structured information. For example, what store was this is this from? What's the total amount? What's the tax? When was the purchase date, and so on? And this is, of course, available as text. And if we would do OCR on this, we would get all of the text, but we wouldn't get the context, so to say. What is it says 94 here, but what is that? Yeah, but that's the total amount. It says Willys here. What is that? Yeah, that's the name of the store, and so on. We have other kind of forms. I'm not sure about how it is in Norway, but in Sweden, we have these forms when you're about to issue a passport. I'll get back to a hands-on demo on that soon. We have forms or documents that's legal documents that have information and kind of semi-structured information or unstructured information where the information is basically hidden in the flow of text. We have product documents, product information, and we might have passports. And all of these contain information. Maybe they are documents, there might be PDFs, there might be photos of something handwritten, there might be a PNG file, a JPEG file or so. And optimally, as some IT person who believes in structured data, optimally these things wouldn't be PDFs, they wouldn't be PNG images, they wouldn't be printed and filled in and scanned. They would be digital formats as for example certificates that could be stored in XML files, in CSV files, JSON files. There could be a REST API. But in the best of worlds, everything would be digital. But the reality we live in is that a lot of these things aren't digital. They are a PDF that you download from the Swedish government. You print it, you fill it in, and you bring it to the police station. The receipt, even though there are a lot of efforts in Sweden actually digitalizing receipts, a lot of receipts are still printed out as a paper. You bring that and you put it you put it in your pocket, and you might forget about it. And a lot of product information is still available as PDF files or your manual or things like that. That's available as PDF files to download from the vendor. But there might. What if we could extract these information? What if we could take kind of the unstructured, the images, the PDF files, and make them structured? So until the day that all of these things will be structured and will be available in machine readable formats, what if we can actually do that with a service? And here is where Azure Form Recognizer comes in. So we are able to train an AI model to understand these documents, to understand the passport, to understand the receipt, to understand the handwritten form. And out of that, we will get JSON. We are able to communicate with Azure Form Recognizer through a REST API, get JSON in a structured format so that we can make sense of the data. So until the day that everything is digitalized, we could use this to process data automatically and in larger volumes. So Azure Form Recognizer builds on 3 levels of analyze tools, so to say. We have the general document analysis, which supports read, layout, and general. And there are basically 3 levels of analyzing a document in general, so to say. So on this level, you could take a document, you can take an image or a file. You don't need to pre-train the model in any way. You take the model, you hand it to, or you take your document, you hand it to the model, and the model will tell you about what text can I find, what layout, are there any tables in this page, are there any checkboxes, or in the general model, it can actually identify and make connections between labels and data and so on. I'll get back to a hands-on demo on this in just a few minutes. So this is very good if you don't know, you might have a large data set of PDFs, of documents and so on, and you just want to find out, are there structured data that can get out of these ones without knowing what type of documents they are. On top of that, we have the pre-built models, where models that builds upon common structures that's available. For example, Microsoft have pre-trained a model for invoices, for receipts, for business cards, for identity documents, and a few other types, which we will see soon. So here is a good thing that if you have an invoice or a receipt, you can hand it to Azure Form Recognizer, and that will return structured information about these documents, saying this seems to be an invoice. Here's the total amount. Here are the line items. Here's the here is the company that will receive the money, and so on. And last but not least, we have the custom models. So if you want to enhance the scoring, if you want to have better predictability, if you want to have better support for documents that's not supported either by the pre-built models, or you don't get enough accurate data from the general document analysis, you can train a model yourself, specifically tailored toward your document type. And I will now guide you through all of these 3 levels through demos. So let's dive into that and bring the Form Recognizer tool. So we'll see. Let me open the correct window, which is this one. So this is the Azure Applied AI Form Recognizer Studio preview. So this is a tool because Form Recognizer in itself, that's a service you provide in Azure. And I forgot to tell you about that, but it's not a service that's totally for free for everyone to use, but it's a service. You deploy it in Azure, and you get an API endpoint which you can ask, and which you can use to kind of train your model. You could use it to extract information from your model and so on. So with this one, let me just click the correct thing here. With this one, once you have deployed your service into Azure, you can start the Form Recognizer Studio, which is a UI on top of the service, so that you can have a visual understanding and a visual tool to work with your models. And as I mentioned, as I showed you in the diagram before, we have the basic layer, which is document analysis with read, layout, and general. We have pre-built models for invoice, receipts, and so on. And we have the custom models. Let's start from the beginning with the read. So read is the simplest of all models. That is, in essence, just OCR. So if we add a document here, let's take this one, and let's use let's use a Swedish newspaper and analyze that. So what this will do is analyze the document. It will highlight where have I found texts. It found text here and here and here and so on. And that text is extracted and showed to us to the right here. So this is a visual representation of what's in the image. If we look at the result, we have all the data as a structured JSON document. So this is what you technically get when you call the API. And so you get on what coordinate are all the text available, and at the bottom you get the actual, I think it's over here, the actual blocks of text. And the very interesting thing here is that it doesn't just extract the text like from top left to top right. That's usually how OCR have been done previously. So a lot of OCR technologies before basically went from top left to top right. So took a few texts here, took a few lines over there, went back, took that line, and took a few lines over here, and so on, which really doesn't make sense when we as humans can actually see this is a newspaper written in columns, and the natural reading order would be to read the headline, the ingress here, the first column, the second column, and so on. So if we look here and have a look at, let's see. So if we look at the actual column here, it says, vill man att kommande gäster ska notera ens goda stil och smak. So let's look in the, now I'm reading in Swedish, and I hope you get my Swedish pronunciation. If you search for this text, you can see that this is the exact order that the text was extracted in. So it understands what would be the natural reading order for a human of such text. And this can be very good. Let's take a scenario, for example, where you're digitalizing a lot of books or a lot of newspapers historically or so, and want to make them searchable and readable. Having the natural reading order option is a really good thing. But if we were to take something more complicated, let's use this document. So this is a document called Byggvarudeklaration. Well, I think that would translate to something like product information for the construction industry, if we were to translate it to English. So it's a specification, or it's actually from the beginning, as I've understood it, a Word file that companies could download, enter their information, and then export it as PDF and publish it on their websites. Now there is an XML equivalent of this called eBVD, but this is kind of where the majority of products have their, in this format is where the majority of their Swedish products have specified their content. So the document specifies what's the name of the product, what does it contain, does it support these criteria, and so on. Things relevant for people in the construction industry to know. So if you were to build a system that would index these documents, how would you do that? You could either kind of read them manually and enter the information in a system, or you could actually let Form Recognizer try to see what's in this document. What text are there? What's the name of the product, and so on. So if we try to analyze this with the read API, we will get all of the texts, but that really doesn't make sense, which I will show you, because we will get a bunch of text. But this is quite a complicated document. It's rather a table and structured information that's read as fluent text, and that really doesn't make sense. But then we could step up to the layout API, taking the exact same document and analyzing that with the layout option. It will take slightly more time because it will do some more processing. And then the interesting thing is here, if we go to content, we can actually see that, okay, I found some data, then I found a table, and that table looks like this. Here I found a checkbox that was selected. Here I found another checkbox that's unselected. I found some text and so on. So this allows us to extract layout information from a document. So we can see that there's a table. Maybe we could go down here. So here's a table with content of the product. So we have a structured understanding, and that's represented in JSON as a table document and so on. But it doesn't really give us any context. So for example, here's a checkbox that's unselected, but we don't know the name of such text box. We just know that there is a text next to it, but doesn't know the connection between them. So the last model available under general document analysis is the general general document model. So let's upload the same document once again and run it through the analysis of general document. So this is kind of the most fully featured model available for analyzing any document. And this will try to make connections as well. So what's really interesting here, as you can see, it takes slightly more time. If you just want the text, the read API will be faster. But if you want structured information, this will give you more data. So if you go back here, let me just take some water. We can see that, okay, it found a text box. It's unselected, and the key for this text box is ny deklaration, which is specified there. Here's another text box that is selected, and we have another label for that. And we have the confidence levels and so on. We have the no checkbox, the yes checkbox. We also have the table data with the checkbox within them. So in this case, for example, or let's take something over here. We have the organization number and the value. So it can identify, okay, this seems to be the label and this seems to be the text. So even though they are within the same text box, it's able to identify what is the key and what is the label or value. And these are also available as part of the the JSON. So if you were to build a system around this, you could say, here's a document. Can you please give me a list of key value pairs of things found in this document? And the general model and the general analysis is usually is best if you have, let's say you have documents in a document system, your user uploads documents, or you're about to migrate or scan or digitalize kind of historical data or large volumes of documents that you really don't know the exact type of. Then you could extract metadata out of that. You could, for example, say, okay, I have a lot of documents here with forms people filled in, with phone numbers, e-post addresses, and so on, or email addresses, or things like that. Please take all of the documents and see if you find any keys specifying email, and then give me all of those email addresses. And please give me all documents where the email address ends with this email, for example, or this hostname. So that's a very good thing for making a general search, for making kind of structured information about any type of document. But sometimes we actually know what kind of documents we are working with. Let's see. Yeah. So, for example, you might do expense reporting. A few document types are quite structured or are quite common all around the world. So therefore, as I said, Microsoft have pre-trained models. At the hackathon that we were doing at our company, I think now it's actually 2 years ago, me and my colleagues set out to see how automated can we make expense reporting. So our idea was that we wanted to have kind of one or as few clicks as possible on your smartphone to do expense reporting. And what we realized was that kind of most of us in the team who built this, we had automated backup of our images to our OneDrive account. So basically, whenever we took a photo, in the background, OneDrive would kick in, take the photo, sync it to our OneDrive folder. So what we set up during the hackathon to get it working as quick as possible was on flow. Or I'll get back to exactly but what we set up was a flow to identify whenever a file is uploaded to OneDrive, please analyze it using the receipt model in the Form Recognizer. Try to see, is this a receipt or not? And if it is, what store was it bought in? What's the date of the receipt? What's the total amount? What's the tax and things like that? And then use the API for our expense system to create a draft expense. So we implemented that during using Power Automate because Power Automate has pre-built connectors for Form Recognizers and for OneDrive, not for our expense system, but for the other ones. So we were able to create this very quickly. What we then did was that, so whenever a photo was taken of an image, I try to identify, is this a receipt or not? If it is a receipt, please extract the information, create the draft, and then it sent a push notification to the phone saying, I found a receipt from, in this case, Starbucks, and it's for this amount. Do you want to approve it or not? Is this correct? And it was created in the system. And there's a flow in Power Automate. But I won't show you Power Automate, but I will show you how the receipt model works and how that can be used. So let's bring up this one again. So as I mentioned, we have invoices, receipt, business cards, identity documents, and here are a few United States specific documents. So I won't go into the details of those. But let's take receipts. I'm not sure if you've ever been. I'm not sure if this story is available in Norway or not. But in Sweden we have what's called the Shell & Company. So Shell & Company, a couple of years ago now, I think 2018. Yeah, time flies. I was buying a few things to the phone, some lightning adapter and some HDMI cable and SIM cards and so on. So if we were to analyze this document, you see the pattern. Text that's been identified by Form Recognizer is marked as yellow, but things that have been identified as something special or something that's understandable is marked with colors. So we see, for example, this is the merchant phone number. This is the merchant name, Shell & Company. This is the description of what's been bought. We have the different prices per line, so to say. And we have the total amount for the whole receipt. We have the total tax. We have the transaction date, the transaction time. And at the right here, we can get a summary. So we also see the confidence score for each one of them. We could see the items that's extracted as a table. And we get the total price and the confidence level for this one as well. So this could, of course, then be used to input that automatically into an expense system. And whenever you're using these services to automate stuff, think about how to do that in a responsible way. So just because this service is quite sure that this was the things that was extracted, we in our team, when we did this as a hackathon, we decided the most responsible way would be to create it as a draft, but then let the human decide, is this kind of have the second opinion? Is everything automatically extracted? Or correctly extracted? Is it the correct amount? Is everything, or is this even an expense for my company? Maybe it was a private expense and things like that. So we didn't want to do it automatically all the way. But you could also see it as the other way, that if you don't want to automate it by default, you could say that, okay, we still have some manual inputs, but you could do an automated audit, so to say, to see that what if an employee didn't enter the last zero, or didn't enter or added a zero too much at the end, so that the amount specified in the receipt doesn't add up to what's specified in the input on the system. And you could do this to automatically look at large volumes of receipts and kind of see, do they match what's entered manually, and then let someone else have a second opinion or a second look. Is this correct information entered into the system? Let's just have a look at another last. I think we could do the identity documents. And Microsoft do provide a sample here, because I don't want to expose my either my ID license or my passport on the internet. But Microsoft have provided a sample passport here for us to analyze. So if we were to analyze this one, what it does is actually, because as I've understood it, this is an international standard on how to do these passports. So in this field below here, we have the machine readable zone. And in the machine readable zone, that's a compact format of the information available in this passport. So if we open that one, we could see that we have the country or region, date of birth, expiration, document number, and so on and so on. So this could be relevant if you are doing analysis of ID licenses or ID passports automatically at scale. So let's move into maybe the most interesting category, the custom models category. So I will bring that up for you. So with custom models, as I mentioned, we are able to do the training and customizing towards our specific scenarios. Maybe there isn't a pre-built model. Maybe there isn't the general model just isn't enough. Just isn't as accurate as you need it to be. And a use case and a scenario here that I have is about Swedish passports. I briefly mentioned the Swedish police form and showed you that before. And I guess as you in Norway, you like to travel, and we in Sweden, we like to travel, whether it's to Norway or to Spain or to the United States of America. And doing that, you need passports. So in my case and in my family, we were about to travel to Spain, I think it was 2 years ago, in the beginning of 2020. And then something happened, COVID, that we all are aware of. And with that, basically, we had, in this case, we had issued a passport for our son, Elliot. But then COVID came and we didn't need that passport. But now, a few years later, we realized, okay, we need new passports for our children, because basically our son Elliot, he was 2 weeks old when he got his first passport. So really, we couldn't identify him with the passport. We needed to issue a new one. But I think you might have the same scenario in Norway, that now that everyone wants to travel again and everyone needs new passports, and this is the Google Trends for, I think it's how to issue passport question in Sweden. So for the Swedish market, how often are people searching for how to issue a passport? And as you can see, the interest have exploded during the last couple of days or the last couple of weeks, actually. And it's really an issue here. If you look at Swedish news, you really need to wait months to get a new passport. And people are starting selling their times on the black market. And you need some people do have to travel 8 hours to get to the closest police station that have available times. So it's really an issue. And as I mentioned, we really needed a new passport for our son, Elliot. And this is Elliot. It's my son. He just turned 2 years old, and a lot of people says he is very, very similar to Emil, the Emil character. He's as glad and as he does as much. I'm not sure what's called in English, but hyss it's called in Swedish at least. But so we, as I mentioned, we did issue a passport for Elliot 2 years ago when he was newly born. What happened at that time was actually that we had filled in the passport, the form for doing that. It turns out that if not both of the parents to the children are available or are able to make it to the police station at the same time, at least one needs to be there, but the other one can instead fill in this form. So you basically fill in the form saying, I agree that the other parent can actually issue a new passport, and then people need to sign to verify that it actually was the other parent that was signing the document and so on. So it's not super complicated, but it's quite a lot of fields to fill in. And one really interesting thing is, I'm not sure if I'm able to zoom here. I actually am. Let me see if that works. On the top right here, we have 3 checkboxes. And that checkbox is actually, what kind of passport do you want? Do you only want a passport? Do you want a national ID card, or you want both of them? And if you don't fill in any of the checkboxes, you have basically said, I have a sign that I don't want anything. And that was what was happening 2 years ago for us. I was working and my wife were about to go and pick up the passport. I had signed and done all of the paperwork. She came to the police station saying, okay, sorry, you need to go home and do this again, because it turns out that you have signed a paper saying, I don't want anything. And at that time, it wasn't an issue because, the lines were, you could fill in the document, get a new time the next day, and we were just arranging things. That went fast. But now that you have to wait up 6 to 12 months in the line to get a new time for issuing a passport, you really don't want to mess up with this document. You really don't want to kind of fill it in a wrong way, stand there at the police station saying, sorry, you missed a checkbox, please go home, fill it in correctly, and wait another 12 months to get back and get a time here. So I mentioned these ones. So what I thought, and what's actually one of the cool features of a form recognizer, is that what if we could make something that pre-validates this form so that we can be more confident that it will pass through once we get to the police station. I know optimally the police department would build something digital. You would fill this in your smartphone. You would sign it with the kind of bank ID with a digital certificate. And you would say that, yeah, I allow the other parent to get this passport, and everything would be digital. But we are not there today. And given that the pace things are evolving, I'm not seeing this will happen in the near time. So I thought, what if I can make something that pre-validates this manual document, giving me more confidence that when I fill it in, it will actually be correct. And the time it would take to create that, you could just look through the document. But I'm thinking about it in a way that this could be, of course, be released as an app. Then the police department or someone else like me could release an app saying, okay, we can try to pre-validate your form. Give you kind of checkboxes saying, it seems that you have filled this in correctly, or it seems that something is wrong or something needs to be changed before going to the police department. So what I will show you is one of those custom models that I've trained. Here we go. So we go to the custom model. At the bottom here, we have different projects, because when you're doing custom models, you can have multiple models. And you need to train them individually. So in this case, me and my colleagues did sit down and created a bunch of fake forms. So this doesn't contain any personal identifiable data that's real. It's just all made up. So what we did was I think we filled in 7 of them or so. I've uploaded them to the service, and then I've started to label the data. So what I've said is that, okay, with this text that was available there, that's the city where the parent number 1 is located. And this field is the green ones. That's the name of the parent number 1, and so on and so on. So you're telling the system about different information about kind of what is what, so to say. So instead of relying on the labels within the boxes, we can give them a specific label saying this is expected to be a checkbox. So we can look at that. Here are checkboxes. This checkbox is called that, and so on and so on. So given that we have provided it with a few documents, we have labeled the data, we can then go in and do our model training. So what Azure will do then is take our documents, take the metadata we are provided with all the labels and so on, and start training the model, creating a pre-trained model that can identify your data. So I've done that already because it can take a couple of minutes to train such model. So I've created the PASS v2 model, and that you could see what fields will it be able to identify with what accuracy on average, and so on. So we have some data about the model. And now I can test the model. So if I provide it with a pass form that it hasn't seen before. So this is the test version that I didn't use in training. And as you can see, we have data. And I I have made sure to fill it in incorrectly. For example, I have missed out on actually ticking one of those boxes. I have filled in things that I shouldn't be filling in, because this should be filled in by the police person. And this field shouldn't be filled in by you either, because that should also be filled in by the police person. And there are some rules down here saying what you should do and what you shouldn't, and so on. So if we analyze this document, we will get the data. We will get, let's see. We will get the data extracted here. So we could see what is the postal code for person number 2. It seems to be empty. What is the telephone number for person number 1? What is the city, and so on? What is the date of birth? Yeah, basically all the properties that we have trained it on. And if we look at the result here, because now what I will show you is the application I built to actually do the scoring or do the validation. So what that builds upon is that it knows that in the resulting JSON, we are able to get, for example, take that one. We are able to get the labels with metadata extracted from this document. So, for example, what is the phone number of parent number 2? Yeah, that is a string value. Here's the value of it, and that value is available on page number 1 within this box. So that gives us kind of all the data we need to know. So I've taken that one and I've created an application written that in C#. So here's Visual Studio. I'm not sure if C# is a language that you are aware of or not. So what I've done is, let me see. So what I've done is to create a console application that uses the SDK from Microsoft for the document analysis client. I point that to a URL. You could point it to a local file also, or a file stream. But I've uploaded my test passport to a blob storage account. So I say, please analyze this one using these credentials. And then I start the analysis of the document. I wait for it to complete, and then I get my data back. And then I've written some parsing of the model. So I haven't parsed the whole document as for now, just parsing a few fields to give you the kind of idea on what's possible to do. So I created a structured class here that will parse some metadata, some name, some length, some checkboxes, and so on. And given that, it will plot, because this application knows the rules, so to say, on what should be filled in and not, and it will plot that result to the console. So I'll launch this console application so that we can see what it does. So it starts by analyzing the document. And once it gets the result back, we can see that, okay, maybe I can show you the document in parallel here, so it's slightly more easy for you to see the actual thing here. Whoops. Let's do like this. So let's begin with, for example, the meta date here. That shouldn't be filled in. It was expected to be empty, but it is filled in, because this should be filled in by the police department. The type, expected exact one to be checked, but none of them are checked. The length here, for example, that field was also left out empty. That's expected. Oh, sorry, it's written. Maybe I got it wrong here. That's the opposite way around here. So I think it's just a spelling thing here. But the thing is here that we can make a pre-validation. So this could have saved me loads of time 2 years ago if I could have pre-validated a document, giving me a hint. Please check one of those checkboxes before you go, or before you kind of sign it. That will make life easier for you. So given that, and of course, not everything is about validating. You could, of course, also use this for extracting. I know companies are using it for extracting documents that they have. They might have like large archives of analog documents that's either scanned or taken photos of, and they want to have them in a structured way to make it searchable and make it available for people to use. And then you could train custom models on that to extract such data. And we are getting closer to the questions time, so let's do a wrap of what we have been talking about. So Form Recognizer is a tool for doing OCR, but not just getting text, but actually getting context instead, to get structured information about what's in the text, to be able to know, okay, this is a table, this is a checkbox, this checkbox has a label, this is a document that we know about that we can extract the information from, and so on. And by default, or Azure Form Recognizer is a service in Microsoft Azure, and by default, then the easiest way to use it is to deploy it to the public cloud. You could either go to the portal and create it manually, or you could script it with your infrastructure as code, the language of choice. You call it from your application. So even though there is a Form Recognizer Studio available for trying it out, for kind of training the model, you usually want to consume it from your application. It's built for developers, for IT people to kind of embed and to use from your applications. So your end users will not be using the Form Recognizer Studio. But it's also available to deploy as a Docker container. I know that some companies have scenarios where they don't want to send data to the public cloud, but you could then use Azure Form Recognizer in the private cloud. So that's how you use Form Recognizer. That is part of the cognitive services suite, so to say. And then you ask, is this free or is it a paid service? Of course, it is a paid service. There are a few pages. I think, it says up to 500 pages per month you can scan and analyze for free. So for testing purposes, if you want to play around with the service, it's really affordable and you can try it out. But for an enterprise or for a kind of company scenario, you really want to pay for it so that you get a reliability and SLA for the service. And I won't dig into the details of the pricing, but it's available on the Azure Pricings page. And with that being said, I have about 2 minutes left, but I think we could start with the questions already. I haven't checked in the chat if there are any questions so far.
There's no questions.
Okay, no questions.
No.
Is it either crystal clear or have you all been?
Yeah, you answered the ones I wrote down, I think, at least. I had to look up pricing and these kind of things during the talk. And I see it's available in North Europe, but not in Norway or the Sweden.
Exactly.
Sweden center yet.
Form Recognizer is, I think, in general, quite a lot of these more specialized services are not available in Sweden yet, and that's the same for Form Recognizer. But you could, for example, store your data in Sweden in a blob storage account in the Azure Sweden data center, but then analyze it from a Form Recognizer deployment in West Europe, or you might have your whole deployment in West Europe. But that's correct.
Yeah, or use on the on-prem. Yes.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, so you could deploy it as a Docker container also. So you could potentially deploy it as a Docker container in the Swedish data center to get. But then it's up to you to actually maintain that container or kind of make sure that it's running and so on. But then, of course, you could use the Azure Container Instance, or you could use some kind of more low maintainability version of container runtime.
It also seemed to handle special characters pretty well, so I guess it will work with the Norwegian language, just as the Swedish.
Exactly, it works with the Swedish Å, Ä, and Ö, so I think it will be the same with Norwegian.
Yeah, and you told a little bit about the if it's kind of a mixed document, if there's some tables in there and some text, that you could get some metadata out. But what would you do after that? If you have a document that are say 20 pages, and some of it are text that are scanned in. Some of them are text that is like it's part of the PDF.
Yeah.
And some of it are tables, and some of it are not.
So I would say, if you are doing it very general, that I have 100,000 documents here that's kind of just unstructured, and I want to make it searchable. For example, if you are using Azure Cognitive Search, like by default, you can just say, please get all of the text from this one. So that more or less search it as if it were just a large amount of text, even if it in the document is an image of text, or if the document contains the PDF might contain a PNG file which is taken of a news article, for example. But then when if you're using some indexing tool like Azure Cognitive Search, you could also extract some kind of key value pairs, so that you can filter by them, or say that give me all keys that's named email address, for example, and then you could easily filter all documents depending on what email addresses are available, or give me all keys that's named name, for example, and then give me all documents where the name is saying Peter, for example. So it's mostly a lot about extracting some kind of key value pairs from larger documents to make it searchable, or make it indexable, or maybe finding personal identifiable information in unstructured data.
Would you also get text like image of a bird, or because cognitive service has a little bit of these kind of things also?
It will not give you that in Form Recognizer, but in Azure Computer Vision, you have that possibility. Let me see. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned, is this a bird? Because I have, this is one of my hobby projects. It's actually based on a joke. So this is built upon the technology in Azure Computer Vision. So if you provide it with images of birds, it will say, this is a bird, this is a bird, but this is not a bird. So this is built on the possibility to extract a description and tags from an image in Azure Computer Vision, and it's available on GitHub, all the source code for people to look at.
Cool.
So that speaking of that, when you're working with Azure Cognitive Search, you're usually enhancing data with different analysis tools, for example. So if you were to search or index all the data in this blob storage account, if it finds an image, that image you might want to do computer vision on to get, are there birds available in the images? Are there text available in the images, and so on? And if you're doing, if it finds an audio file, you might want to do speech to text to find out what's being said in that audio file. If it finds a video file, you could do the same thing, and so on. So and then if it finds a PDF or finds something that looks like a form or a document, you could run Form Recognizer on that.
And file formats is it showed PDF, but also Word files and
let me see.
XPS, or I know this.
That's a good. Let me see. Find his documentation. I usually get that question a lot, but I always forget it. Let's see, PNG. So the layout API at least supports PDF, TIFF, JPEG, and BMP.
Yeah.
And then you could, of course, convert them to these formats if you don't have it by default.
Yeah.
And also a question that I get from time to time that for Form Recognizer, if you run it in a container yourself, and yes, they will do that, because you're actually running the container is probably not the expensive part of it. It's rather creating the software and creating the service Form Recognizer that has pre-built models that have the kind of infrastructure and actually training custom models and so on. And that's what you are being charged for. So yes, you can't really take the container and run it yourself and not pay anything. It's you're still being billed by the pages you analyze.
Yeah.
Do
Interesting.
you have any comments or questions in the chat?
No comments or questions yet. No. So probably not going to be anyone.
No?
But yeah, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. I liked it a lot. And a difference in today is that we have a QR code down here. That's the Metimeter. It's 4 simple questions, just rate the talks. So we will be really happy if people do that. And if you were here yesterday and watched, so please rate those sessions too if you haven't done already. So that, I think we could wrap it up. And again, thanks.
Thank you for thank you for having me, and thank you for listening into my session. And hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Hello, everyone. If there are any new joiners right now, I would like to welcome you to day 2 of Global Azure Norway. My name is Kristina Devochko. I'm one of the organizers and one of the board members in Norwegian.net user group Oslo. So we are behind this conference this year, and we are ready for session number 2 of today. And I would like to present our great speaker that will be running this session. It's Veronika Kolesnikova. Veronika is a senior software engineer and a Microsoft MVP in AI, and she is passionate about backend web development, mainly with Microsoft technologies like C#, .NET, Azure. Veronika is a public speaker, a hackathon volunteer, and she is also curious about mobile, machine learning, and AR. Veronika holds a master degree in information technology, and in her free time, she likes dancing, traveling, and practicing aerial yoga. So today, Veronika is going to share with us some really exciting information about Bot Composer and a new way of creating smart bots. Are you ready to take it away, Veronika?
Yes, thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. I wish I was in Oslo in person, but maybe next time. But today I am saying hello to all of you from Boston, Massachusetts, USA. So, hello. I'm glad it's not in the middle of the night here. So, I am still fresh and I have lots of power to go through the presentation. And today we'll be talking about the Bot Composer. That's a pretty new tool. I'm calling this presentation a new way of creating smart bots and that way is Bot Composer. That session, I'm pretty sure will be useful for seasoned bot developers as well as for newbies, because we'll just have overview of the tool and we'll try to understand how it all fits in that whole Azure AI architecture and the whole structure of tools for bot development. So let's move forward. Here on the slide, you can see my name, Veronika Kolesnikova. Again, that's me, and also my Twitter handle. So feel free to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to ask me questions there. I'll try to find answers for you. Send me DMs, follow me there. I'm posting mostly about technical stuff that I'm passionate about. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but if you want to add me there, please write a message how you know me, because it might get confusing what's going on there. So, okay, that was a quick intro. I think Christina actually covered my background really well, so I don't want to go through all of that again. I'm a senior software engineer. I'm Microsoft MVP in AI. I already have 3 MVP awards and hoping for another one this year. So fingers crossed. I'm excited for July. So yeah, if you have any questions regarding the session, please feel free to ask. I think Christina will relay those questions to me. I also have a couple of pauses throughout the session just to answer questions, or I can answer some of them in the end. So yeah, let's go. um, since it's a global Azure event, you might be wondering, okay, so it's all about Azure, but how bots are fitting in that Azure universe. And you probably know that Azure is just massive. It has a lot available there for all kinds of developers, non-developers, technical people, managers, all kinds of people who are interested in technology and using technology every day. Azure has everything you want to you want to know, you want to build, and all the tools that you might need to use for all kinds of applications. I just want to quickly provide an overview of Azure AI monolith, let's call it that. That's not an official term, so don't quote me on that. We'll start with top here, Azure ML. That is a tool that is mostly focused on building models, creating machine learning models from scratch, also cleaning up your data, making sure your models are responsible. If you are a data scientist and you are using Azure tools, then Azure ML is probably your tool where you go to for everything related to machine learning. You can upload your data there, you can clean it out, you can train it. It also includes AutoML. So even if you're not a data scientist, you can use Azure ML capabilities in order to build your custom machine learning models and then save them, deploy them, use them. So Azure ML, it is just really useful tool where you can write your code for machine learning, and also you can have that UI functionality where you drag and drop different parts of it and then enhance them with code. But that is more like data science heavy. So you need to have some kind of either background in data science, maybe you had special education, you learn data science in school or by yourself, or at least you need to have some kind of experience in order to use Azure ML and build models there. So next layer is cognitive services. Probably you heard about them by now because they're super popular. They actually did some shuffling around recently. So there we used to have lots of cognitive services available. Now we have less of them, but they got some of them got kind of migrated to apply the AI section. And cognitive services are APIs and SDKs that you can use in all kinds of applications. They have pre-built machine learning models, so you don't need to build anything from scratch there. You just basically plug in those cognitive services into your application, and then you have that artificial intelligence connected to your application. They also have containers there, so you can use them on specific devices for IoT projects and so on and so forth. So if you want to learn more about cognitive services or actually any of those tools and topics and set of tools that I'm covering here, Microsoft has great documentation, lots of information, lots of examples in GitHub, so feel free to check it out. I'm gonna move quickly to next set of tools here is applied AI. And I know when applied AI was introduced, was it 2 years ago? It was pretty recent. So I think it was 2 years ago when they introduced applied AI. It was, I remember I had lots of questions myself, and then lots of questions. I was asked lots of questions about applied AI and how it is related to cognitive services. Actually, what Microsoft did, they reshuffled some cognitive services, combined them together, and then created applied AI services out of some of them. So cognitive services is just basically one detail, one maybe small item that you can use, you can customize and reuse. Applied AI, that is more a combination of a couple of applied AI. It's a combination of maybe a couple of cognitive services there. So that combination, that one applied AI service usually focuses on one specific scenario, and actually bots, they are part of applied AI offering, so they are an applied AI service. Also in applied AI you have um, uh, monitoring tools and analytic tools. So definitely check them out. But they each applied AI service kind of combines several cognitive services all together. So if you're planning to use several of cognitive services, you don't you need maybe to think twice. And if you have one applied service, applied AI service, then you don't need to create separate cognitive services, and just create one applied service and use it for your scenario. So next level is Power Apps. I have an example here. It's AI Builder, but actually there are lots of different Power Apps that are available there. You probably know that Power Apps, they are part of Power Platform, and you can build low code or no code solutions using Power Platform. That is good if you have a mixed team where you have developers and non-developers, and then non-developers definitely want to help and make your project successful, so they can use one of their Power Apps. They also have, for example, for bots, they have Power Virtual Agent there, and that is basically drag and drop functionality. They have a UI. You grabbing different parts and then combining them all together and see how that all work. So you don't need to use any kind of code. You can still export them and then customize them outside of Power Platform, but inside the Power Platform, you don't have to write any code. So you can see how Azure AI is structured from a lot of code up top with Azure ML, where you deep in the weeds of machine learning and artificial intelligence. You need to have experience, you need to have knowledge for building custom models, and then you start getting lower in that pyramid, and then in the end you don't need to have any kind of knowledge about machine learning. You don't need to have any coding knowledge. You just need to have your application in mind, and then find the right Power App, and then basically use the drag and drop functionality, and still build really powerful, really great solutions there for all kinds of applications. Okay, I can actually talk about it for hours and hours. So let's move to bots finally. So if you are seasoned bot developer, you probably know what a bot is. If you're just starting out and figuring out the tooling and that what's happening here, then I want to kind of establish that baseline for the definitions and stuff like that. So what is a bot? Bot actually has lots of different definitions. And one of them is that it's a tool or a piece of software that can actually understand your user's command. And then based on that understanding, it can either perform some kind of actions or provide answers to the user. So it is important for a bot to have machine learning in the core. I think the simplest bot that you can create is just an echo bot. You probably heard about it. Echo bot is just repeating whatever your user types there or says. But that's not a really efficient bot. You want to have machine learning behind the scene in the core of every bot to actually analyze the requests that are coming in, and then based on that provide some information or perform some kind of actions. I have the whole diagram with examples later on. So let's move forward here. Is bot the same as virtual assistant? I know it might be a controversial topic. I personally think that bot is the same as virtual assistant because bot is in the core of every virtual assistant. But virtual assistant can have additional capabilities like understanding speech, although bots can understand speech too. But virtual assistant skill is usually connected to a specific virtual assistant like Siri and Cortana. Here in the bottom, you can see a couple of examples of virtual assistants. And then why I think that the bot is the same as virtual assistant. I actually um, think about that mostly when I see different channels you can connect your bot to if you are using Azure bot offerings. Then you can connect it to um, SMS, for example, or Twilio, and then also you can connect it to a virtual assistant like Alexa or Cortana. So basically, it's the same bot. It just understands speech, and it can be connected to that specific virtual assistant. So here I have several examples. I already mentioned them. Siri, Cortana, we all love Clippy. Clippy is also a virtual assistant. Smarter Child, I've never seen it in my life, but if you've seen it, you might recognize it here. And then Tay, I always try to mention that story about Tay. Uh, it doesn't matter if I'm talking about bots specifically or I'm talking machine learning in general. Tay is just a good example of what not to do. Several years ago, Microsoft actually released that bot in Twitter, and then it's supposed to learn from tweets. And then based on that learning, Tay was posting some tweets itself. So within a couple of hours, they actually became absolutely uncontrollable, racist, fascist, absolutely horrible, horrible thing that posted awful things in on Twitter. And then Microsoft had to delete it. It is funny, sad, but at the same time, it is also a very good learning example there. We can both Microsoft and as machine learning developers or people who use machine learning tools in their applications, we all learn from that experiment that data is very important. Machine learning is not machine learning model is not like a magic box where you can just throw all data and then it will figure out what to do with it. No, your data needs to be very clean, very accurate. You need to make sure that um, doesn't matter what kind of machine learning model you're building, but it has to be responsible. Microsoft actually created responsible AI principles. They also implemented tooling on top of it, so you can make sure that your data is accurate, your model is working fine, and it's not harmful for the community or people, and it's not posting horrible stuff on Twitter. And please don't let your machine learning model just learn from Twitter. Twitter is not a clean place for machine learning models. So now I want to move to tooling. All major companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they are creating so many different tools for all kinds of machine learning development. You can be a data scientist. You don't have to be a data scientist. So this is just machine learning is growing every day, and the companies are offering so many opportunities for all kinds of engineers, developers, data scientists to actually move forward with easily move forward with development, easy to choose tools, pick up the right tools, depending on the level of your involvement in the project and also the level of your knowledge and your comfortability. So here I just want to talk about Microsoft offerings, and we'll start with the Bot Framework SDK. Bot Framework SDK is in the core of every bot. So it doesn't matter if you are not planning to use the SDK itself and you want to use other tools that I'm going to mention later. In the core will be Bot Framework SDK. If you are deciding between tools and you just want to build everything from scratch, maybe you have experience building bots, maybe you just love to actually open your Visual Studio or any ID you prefer. I hope you prefer Visual Studio for bot development. And then you're just getting the SDK, getting specific NuGet packages there, and just start writing your code. There are also some templates available that you can use that allow you to kind of start from scratch, but not from like empty project. But totally up to you if you are that type of person who wants to write everything from scratch and want to be in control of every little detail. Then just grab the bot framework SDK and you can use it for all your bot related projects. So next one is Azure Bot. That is a resource available in Azure. So if you go to Azure portal, then you will see the Azure Bot offering. It used to be Azure Web App Bot, but it got retired, I think, last year. So I think if you had all web app bots, you needed to migrate them to Azure Bots. That's what I heard. I actually haven't done it myself. So if you have experience with that, let me know. But all new bots you are creating from Azure will be Azure bots. And they that resource is actually really similar to the Azure Web App Bot, but it has a little more of observability, analytics, connection to channels. It is so it's not going to be a huge shift if you used to work with Web App Bot and now you need to work with Azure Bot. It is really, as everything on Azure, everything is user friendly. They have lots of documentation, so don't afraid to use Azure bots there. And also a good thing is that you can just click a button and open it right in the bot composer, and it will be automatically connected with your composer, and you don't need to set up any additional publishing profiles. Automatically your Azure bot on Azure will be connected with your composer. Next one is Azure bot channels registration. Actually, that is part of Azure bot. So if you are creating Azure bot, then you don't need to worry about separate resource for channels registration. But if you, for some reason, don't want to use Azure bot, but you want to connect your bot to different channels, then you need to create that separate resource to just connect it to different channels. And on the left, on that beautiful picture that I have, and you can see a couple of channels that are available there. We will have Teams, we have Slack and Twilio, all kinds of messengers. There's also an option to connect to Alexa, which is super cool. That it used to be kind of tricky to connect your bot to Alexa, but now it is streamlined and it's super convenient and super easy to do. So I'm really happy about that channel being available, but they have lots and lots of different channels. So if you have a chance, definitely check it out. But when you build in a bot, definitely keep in mind what channel you are planning to connect it to. Because, for example, if it's a voice-enabled channel, like direct line, or maybe it's an Alexa skill, and then your users are going to interact with your bot or virtual assistant skill through voice commands, and then your bot is just not processing speech, then it's going to be a big problem. So pay attention to that. What kind of input you're going to accommodate in your bot before connecting to different channels. The next one here is Azure Health Bot. That is more like a template or like a structure for your health-related bot. It might be a bot that helps users to figure out what doctors they need to schedule appointment with, or maybe it's a scheduling bot for any kinds of hospitals or medical schools. So all your health-related tasks you can process with that health bot. But so even out of the box, it includes some kind of functionality and understanding of some basics of healthcare, but it is really just the basics. So you just don't expect that you get that resource from Azure and then out of the box it's going to be working perfectly for all your health needs. No, it is just a template for you basically to start building on top of it and actually customizing it for your specific project. And out of the box, the health bot is HIPAA compliant. Next one here is Power Virtual Agent. I already kind of mentioned it when I was talking about the Power Apps and Power Platform. So that is a no-code, low-code option that it allows anyone create their own bot. You're basically taking little pieces of dialogue and then creating the whole understanding the model and the flow of the dialogue using just that drag and drop functionality. And then you don't need to write any code there. You can also export it as a skill and then connect it to other bots. Maybe that you maybe build it with the composer, or you build it with just Azure bot resource. You just wrote code and just not connected to anything else. But it's really cool that you can actually create bots with different tools and then connect them all together into like a network of bots that can pass information back and forth, or just create skills for the same bot. It is really cool and allows people with different background actually work together. That's awesome. And then last one here is about Composer. I already mentioned it so many times because that's the main tool of today's session. The bot Composer is basically an IDE for bot developers. Now you don't need a Visual Studio if you don't want to use it. You still have an option to use it, but everything that you need for your bot design and development, you have inside Bot Composer. You have visual part where you can see the flow of the dialogues. You can add different variations of questions and answers right there. And then you can write snippets of code, whatever you need, write in the tool, connect to different skills, write in the tool, use different templates, connect to different cognitive services, and also test right inside Bot Composer. So Bot Composer is just great for all your bot development needs. But if it doesn't have something, or you just want to customize it more and you want to see how it works from the code perspective, you are still getting all that project that you can open in your Visual Studio with all the code. So whatever changes you are making in the composer will be reflected in the code, and then changes you're making in the code will be reflected in the bot composer. So you can work in both tools, whatever you prefer. You can mix and match. You can just do everything in the composer, or do most of it in the code, and then you'll see it in the composer or use it for testing. So here I have that huge diagram that I stole from Microsoft documentation, but I think it's just really good because you kind of see that universe of a virtual assistant and what can you do with it, and what main tools are included. It can be a virtual assistant, it can be a bot, just says virtual assistant here. But you can see that in the core of every bot or every virtual assistant, you have the bot framework. It is really useful to understand how the structure of your virtual assistant. So you add in your branding, you add in different personality. Personality might be added by a Q&A maker, because usually when you are adding the Q&A maker, it asks you what kind of personality you want to have there. So you can see that around the bot framework, there are a couple of cognitive services that you might want to connect to, like speech, Q&A maker, language understanding. I think language understanding is pretty much critical there, or Q&A maker. So yeah, you definitely need some kind of a language processing there. And then vision, you can connect also to other machine learning models that are not in cognitive services. They can be custom. You can use custom cognitive services, for example, custom vision. So yeah, lots of opportunities there. And then if you look to the left, you'll see that using Azure Bot Service, you can connect your bot to different channels. I already mentioned channels. There are lots of them available on Azure. It can be direct line, it can be Slack, whatever you prefer. It can be just a web, that pop-up window that sometimes is really annoying on websites. So that is also a channel. And then you need to think about inputs. Um, what kind of inputs your bot will be understanding. If your users are mostly using mobile devices, maybe the bot will react to taps, and have screen interaction, understand speech, also understand written text, maybe understand text from images, and perform optical character recognition. So your users will upload images, and then the bot will process and understand what was on those image, what kind of information was there. Was it a text? Was it some kind of object? And then based on that information, provide some kind of answer or actions. And the next one here is devices. You can connect your bot to different devices, just endless right now. Your customers can use bots on all kinds of devices, mobile devices, smart homes, some devices that are specific for virtual assistants, like for Alexa, you have Echo Dot, for example, and even in cars. So lots of opportunities there. And it's cool. I really like to show that image, that you all understand that the world of bots and bot development is just endless. You can do whatever you want there. So when we move to the right part here, you see that you can connect your bot to different knowledge sources like data sources, general knowledge, different manuals there, connected to custom skills, especially if you're building bots for IoT. That's really cool that using your bot, you can send email or maybe provide some kind of checks, maybe call people, or have some kind of alerts. You can also create some custom skills there. You connect to different APIs, Office Graph, Active Directory, any kind of APIs and skills that you can imagine, you can connect it to your bot. And then the third-party assistants, those are usually the call centers. So if you have an option to have a call center, you can also plan when your bot needs to actually head down, pass down the information to real people, and when is the right time to actually include a call center in your bot interaction. Okay, so now I will provide a quick overview of the bot composer and all the main features of it. So you can create a new bot using templates. They have lots of different templates available, but you can customize those templates, create your own templates, and then reuse them. And it is right inside the composer. You just need to connect to different resource for your templates, and then you'll have all your custom templates if you want to, or use whatever they have there. They have lots of opportunities. They have empty bots. They have bots that are already connected to language understanding, cognitive service, and Q&A maker. And then you have template for virtual assistant. So you are not just there lost when you open it for the first time. You already have some kind of templates that you can create, you can use for your new bots, and you can better understand the structure and how it all works. Yeah, so that's pretty convenient. And next, you can add natural language understanding capabilities using Lewis, Q&A maker. You have some of them available right in the templates, but if you decide to use just empty template and then add them later, that's always an option. You definitely need some kind of language processing there. I already mentioned it before, but it's very important to understand what your user wants actually. Next, right inside the bot composer, you can author text or, if needed, speech variation responses for your bot in different languages. So if you build in a bot that will be used in different regions, different countries, then it's really useful that you have options for different languages, and then your bot can switch between languages. And that's right inside Bot Composer. Next, yeah, so I kind of mixed those 2 points together, but so I already mentioned the languages, but then you can create different variations. So for example, you can have different responses to the same question. So you just keeping it fresh, you keeping it interesting for your customers, because otherwise they're just, okay, I already kind of know what the bot is gonna answer for that question, or what, when they use it a lot, they're like, oh, okay, I know the next question and they kind of know the flow. But then to keep it fresh, the bot maybe can ask the same question in different words and paraphrase it when needed. And also, yeah, use multiple languages there. And then you can test directly inside the composer using an embedded web chat. So you don't need to leave the tool. That's why I call it IDE for bot developers, because you can test right there. You'll have an option to turn on your bot and start testing. You'll see a chat window where you can just interact with the bot and see what your user will see when they will be interacting with the bot. You can also use other tools for testing. Yeah, there are tools available, so you don't have to stay with the composer, but it is just really convenient that you don't need to leave the tool in order to test it, because when you switch into context, sometimes it is getting frustrating what is happening and what's going on. And then you also have the logs for your tests right inside the composer. Next one here is publish. You can publish your bots to Azure App Service and Azure Functions. So you can create publishing profiles inside your bot composer, and then it will publish everything that needed to be published. So it's not only Azure bot resource, but if you connect it to Lewis and Q&A Maker, it will deploy also all the updates to Lewis and Q&A Maker that you probably made. Also, sometimes you need to deploy like a database or additional resources. So whatever you needed on your local machine when you were developing it will be deployed to Azure. And I usually say that there are two ways how you can develop a bot. You can start with Azure, create your Azure bot resource there first, and then open it in the composer, and then they will be connected automatically. Or you can start inside the composer and then deploy it to Azure, and then have that the composer to create that Azure bot resource. When you are connecting your bot to Lewis or Q&A Maker or any other cognitive service inside the composer, you do need to have that resource on Azure um, in order to actually use it, because it's impossible to just have like a template language understanding model. But the composer will actually offer you how you can create your language understanding resource on Azure, and where to find keys and connection strings that you might need. So Composer will help you to connect to those resources. Okay. Next, I want to mention the extension of Power Virtual Agent with Composer. Again, if you have a mixed team, and then maybe some of your developers, they prefer Power Platform, so they created a Power Virtual Agent. They can export it, and then you'll be able to import it inside the composer, and then just continue customizing it, and either connect it to your bot that you were working on, or just basically get that bot and then continue working on it, but inside the composer. So that's really cool. And then next one, you can integrate external services such Q&A Maker knowledge base or other custom resources like custom machine learning models, APIs that you might need, and also you have an option to connect to different libraries right inside the composer. That's why there are two main reasons why I'm calling it IDE for bot developers is the testing right inside the composer, and also an option to connect to different libraries right inside the composer. Okay, so I've been talking a lot and went through all those slides. Now I want to switch to the demo and actually show you the bot composer. Are there any questions?
No questions as of now, Veronika.
Thank you. Okay, I guess I'm just explaining it perfectly. Yeah, so if you never saw the mod composer, here it is. It is really cool. You can just download it online and then connect it to Azure if needed. But overall, you have all the documentation that you need. So you can either start with reading documentation and then get the tool, or you can just go ahead and get the tool and then connect to all kinds of documentation and tutorials right from the tool. So lots of samples on GitHub. The bot framework emulator, when I talked about the testing inside the composer, and then I mentioned that there are other tools. The bot framework emulator is one of the tools that you can use for testing on either your local bots or bots deployed to Azure. So that's pretty cool. It's totally up to you what you prefer. You can pick and choose, you can mix and match, and all that fun stuff here. And also, you can ask questions about on Stack Overflow. There are lots of Learn modules that you can read and learn more about the bot framework composer or other tools that are available and they are provided by Microsoft. I also have a video that I recorded for the Festive Tech Calendar in December. It's a little workshop where I am just showing how to build a bot using Bot Framework Composer in detail. So step by step, you can follow that tutorial there if you want to. Because today we just don't have enough time to actually build a bot using the composer. But I want to show you how you can create a new new bot using the composer. It's pretty simple. You just click create new, and then you'll see all those templates. They are obviously focusing on C# mostly, but then they also have Node options that you can use. They're in preview, but they are still safe to use. You just need to pay a little more attention to the code since it's not completely released yet. But we'll choose C#. You have an option to create empty bot. The core bot with language, that means it's going to use language understanding intelligence service. This one is going to use Q&A maker. Core assistant bot, that's basic virtual assistant. And then some of them are more advanced, like enterprise assistant bot. And actually, before creating, so it's not completely new for you, or you don't know what you are choosing. You have all the information here, what kind of resources are available there, what dialogues are included out of the box. So you see required Azure resources. So you kind of can plan what you are gonna spend. Because every time when you are creating something on Azure, you start spending money. So when you see it before you start development, it is really helpful. But today I want to create that core bot with language. Next, I'm not gonna update the name because that is not important right now. And then runtime, you can either choose Azure Web App or Azure Functions. So you probably remember that I mentioned that you can deploy your bot either to Web App or the functions. I usually just leave it as Azure Web App. And then, you choose your folder. And then and why do you need to choose the folder? Because all the code will be stored in that folder. So if you need to update the code, you want to use your Visual Studio there, then you know where your new project will be created. So we are creating it here. It takes a little bit of time. I hope it will be fast and painless. Yeah, it's a little confusing because it's saying download in template. It is not really like physically downloading it. It is basically creating that template project in your local environment. Yeah, it says creating project, something runtime, all that you might need. Yeah, sometimes it just takes some time. Yeah, but then when it creates it, you'll see that it will provide information what you need to do next. See, it didn't take too long, maybe just a minute or so. So there are steps of what you can do with your bot, but since it's a core bot with language understanding, then you need to set up language understanding resource. So you just click on that, and then you can use existing resource that you already created in your Azure portal. You can create a new resource, or you can generate instructions for Azure administrator if your company has that policy that you have to go through administrator to create resources. I'm not going to do it right now because it's pretty straightforward. You're just following the instructions there and then connecting to either existing resource or creating a new one. But you do need Azure subscription to do that. So definitely pay attention to it. And then once you are creating your resource, it will definitely start charging you. So definitely keep it in mind. So I'm gonna skip it for now. It won't let me test it, or it will actually have all those errors everywhere. But since we don't have a lot of time and I want to show you a couple of things here, I'm just going to skip that, but you can also connect to Q&A Maker right from here. And then, so when we go back here, we see what we have out of the box. We have greeting dialog, cancel, help, error, and then unknown intent. And those are the dialogues. For example, begin dialog. And it's really convenient that you have that UI part where you actually see the dialog flow, what kind of question your bot is going to ask, what kind of information it will grab from the answer, because we probably don't need the whole answer most of the time. We just need to pick important information, like maybe a day or a place, and then work with that information later. So you see the flow of the dialogue. That's super convenient. And then you are connecting all those dialogues back to that main bot. So they're all there here. And how you can do it, you have 3 dots here. You're creating a new trigger, or you can add a new Q&A Maker knowledge base. And what else? In the dialog, you can also add new trigger. You can remove the dialog. So pretty straightforward. You have the output options and problems here. So definitely good login in case you need to debug something. Then you can configure your bot and include your keys for resources. And then you see user input for different dialogues. You don't have a lot here because it's just empty bot basically. And then the responses from the bot. You can actually add like a card there that will be displayed for your users, or just see you have a couple of options. So the bot will ask different questions. It will paraphrase the question every time. It's called that dialogue. And then, yeah, the knowledge bases, if you want to connect some, the forums still in preview. And then here you have that publishing profile. So you can either create a new one, or if you start in building it from the Azure resource that you already created, it will appear here automatically. And then you can, that's the package manager that actually makes makes the composer its own IDE. You can create your custom packages. Those can be bots that you created somewhere else, or you can choose really pre-built packages that are available from NuGet. And then you also have special settings here, and those are the template feed URL. So you can create your custom templates and then create your custom template feed and then update it here. So I know we're at time. I think we have a couple of minutes for questions, if there are any.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much, Veronika, for a great session, great introduction. I learned learned a lot. I hope all the participants did that as well. Thank you for mentioning Clippy. This was my best friend at school, so I never thought about him being a virtual assistant. So now I reflected on that as well. So thank you for doing that. We don't have any questions right now, but I just wanted to mention that please check out the chat. We have posted some useful resources that may help you quickly get started with a bot composer. And other than that, I would like to thank you so much, Veronika, for being with us today, for sharing this with us today, and have a great rest of the day. And
thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to be a part of events like that.
Likewise, thank you for being a part of Global Azure Norway. And for everyone else, thank you so much for staying with us. Please check out the QR code down there, right below Veronika, to fill out a quick survey and let us know how we are doing. How are you doing so far? Do you like our sessions? And please stay tuned for the next session in just a few minutes about Azure Synapse, Power BI, and Purview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Azure Norway. My name is Håkan Silvernagel, and I'm part of the Norwegian.net user group in Oslo, who is arranging this event here. And together with me, we have our speaker, Johan Ludvig Brattås. So Johan Ludvig is the principal solution architect at Capgemini and also a dedicated community guy. He has worked with Microsoft SQL Server since the late 1999, mostly with BI in one form or another. But since 2015, most of his work has been in Azure, working on data platform services, IoT, stream analytics, and Snowflake. And by combining his passion for Microsoft SQL Server with his passion for sharing knowledge, he started speaking at various events in the SQL community. And this is also a way to give back to the community for all the things he has learned over the years. And when not working, Johan Ludvig either spends his time with his kids, playing with new technology, or teaching coeliacs how to bake gluten-free food. So welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
So what will you be talking about here tonight?
Well, tonight I hope to show the audience the full scope of what Microsoft is trying to do in the data analytics space by combining different services that have been there for a while, some new services, and how they mix together.
That's great. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Right, so Synapse, Power BI, and Purview equals true. And the reason why is what I will try to show you tonight. So let's see. First of all, my name is Johan Ludvig. You can find me on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and the slides will be shared so you can contact me whenever you want. First of all, I just want to set the stage a bit because the modern data platform as it is today is built upon several stages or acts. And the first act was the data warehouse. And the data warehouse has been around since around about 1988. And of course, it has evolved over time. And typically, you will find it in three approaches, which is either the dimensional approach, the normalized approach, or the data vault. And data vault is now in 2.0, and you will, of course, find Bill Inman and Ralph Kimball as or Kimball and Inman as the two other approaches named. So data warehouses have a high data quality focus as well as a focus on getting exact numbers. It's meant for reporting enterprise-wide, which means that it will take data engineers lots of time to make sure that they get everything correct before that's pushed out into production. And that has meant that you get very long development cycles. You have gotten improvements over the years to get CI/CD, get it shorter time to market and so on, but still it has a rumor of having very long development life cycles. At the same time, with the advent of big data, relational databases started to struggle. They couldn't perform as well when you were throwing large amount of data, large varieties, quicker data coming in. And we started seeing changes. But the data warehouse itself has a very good strength in that it tells the business, how are we doing? So it's enterprise-wide reporting, cross-domain and cross-source system querying, which means that you can build very good reports on top. But again, this means that you have to take time to develop and join these different sources together. The data lake, however, started off as a response. It has been around since around 2011. My animation was off. It tries to answer these pains that the relational database system have with big data. And let's talk about just volume, variety, and velocity, even though you can have 4 or 5 or 6 V's, whatever marketing departments has been throwing at you. And the typical varieties of the data lake is either the raw data lake, which is just one layer, or the business data lake, or the layered data lake. And what it means is that you can load data into a raw layer and then transform that as you go across. There is no standardization or normalization across the different source systems as you have in a data warehouse. So you can't really cross domain or cross system query as you can in a data warehouse. And the transformation happens in the upper layers, which means that when you are loading data into the raw layer, you typically don't do anything with it. It's a one-to-one with the data source. And then you can transform either by aligning things like date formats, customer formats, so on in one layer, and then maybe add more value into the upper layers afterwards. And the layered data lake gives different user groups different access in these layers. So typically you will find data scientists and data engineers going into the raw layer, whereas a data analyst will go into either a slightly curated layer or a fully transformed layer, and end users will typically just see the fully transformed layer. And data lakes are enablers of data science as well as self-service analytics, but it has struggled with data swamps. So you throw in all the data you have into that data lake. It's a typical IT problem. You want to take care of or save up everything, having old keyboards and mouses lying around just in case you need it someday. And that is also very much a problem, and specifically in on-prem environments where adding that extra disk or that extra storage cluster could take a lot of time to get in. The strength of the data lake, though, is very great for ad hoc analytics or for data trends. And it has, because of no focus on data quality, or at least less focus on data quality and no cross-querying work, it has a very short time to market. Into this mix, we get the modern data landscape. And the modern data landscape tries to merge, because the data warehouse is not going away, and the data warehouse itself has these main strengths that a lot of big enterprises and companies need. And the data lake also helps a lot. So why not just mix these two together into an architecture or a system landscape that can help you to get the best out of both. And this is a Gartner reference architecture for an end-to-end data and analytics platform. And you can see that you have layers and domains. It's a bit complex. I'm not going to delve deeper into it, but you can recognize some of it also in another reference architecture, which is from Capgemini, where I work. And even though there are lots of boxes here, typically you don't really need to look at all these boxes, but it's there to point out capabilities that you might need. And you have the platform foundation, or the cloud foundation is the purple in the bottom. Overarching, you have a green data governance or data trust services. And then you have data foundation, analytics and BI foundation, and then AI analytics and BI execution as other separate services. And the reason why I'm pointing this out now is that I'll try to pinpoint what Microsoft is doing into this reference architecture. Of course, in everything in IT, you will come up with different new terminology as well. And one of these hot new topics into the market is the data mesh. Or here you have, I think Microsoft called it the normalized mesh, or harmonized mesh, sorry, where you try to build more of an independent microservice approach to data and analytics, where different domains own their own data products and then try to see all users of data as consumers of their data products. So you can build a data mesh on any technology, and I'm not going to delve deeper into it, but I just wanted to tell you that there is a lot going on. But coming back to this modern data landscape, let's take a look at Azure and what Microsoft is doing in this space. Before 2018, 2019, you would typically load data in using Azure Data Factory. Then you would transform that data in Databricks. Then you would store that data in your data lake, which is your Azure Data Lake storage or just storage account. And then you could load the transformed data into SQL Data Warehouse, which is Microsoft, or was Microsoft's massive parallel relational database for warehousing loads. And that's now part of Synapse, but I'll get back to that. And then you would consume data using Power BI, or you would pull Azure Machine Learning on top of that if you didn't use that Databricks, of course, and do machine learning as well. Then in 2019, Microsoft launched Azure Synapse Analytics as a preview. They launched the service in 2020, November 2020, I think. And Synapse Analytics tries to merge all these different components, so data warehouse, Spark Analytics or Spark Transformation, as well as the data warehousing solution, and then combine that and build on top of Data Lake. So Synapse is one name, but it is a whole bunch of different services, which is why sometimes when people are talking about Synapse, you have to stop and ask them, which part of Synapse are you talking about? So Synapse is Azure Data Factory, or Synapse Pipelines. You have SQL Serverless, which is now Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL Pools, and long name. And then you have the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which is now called Azure Synapse Analytics Dedicated SQL Pools. I love marketing names since Microsoft. It's a bit, which SQL pool are we talking about? But serverless and dedicated SQL. Then you have Azure Spark, which is a containerized Spark engine. It is built like Databricks. It builds on top of open source Spark, but it adds their or Microsoft secret sauce on top of it. So until just last month, they didn't have a 3.2 version running, but now they have. And of course, to blend all this together, you have Synapse Studio as well, which is your workspace, so a common workspace for all the different use cases, whether you are a data scientist, you can work here. If you're a data engineer, if you're an analyst, everybody can work on the workspace, and you can share code and data sets between each other in between teams. You also in preview have Azure Data Explorer, and Azure Data Explorer is a time series database. So great for IoT or other kind of time series data. And that has been running as a separate service. You have Log Analytics has Data Explorer underneath the hood as well. And it is a very powerful big data engine. So getting this into Synapse is a fantastic new service here. And of course, you can also do real-time analytics using Azure Stream Analytics. Again, I think it's just called Synapse Stream. And you can run Azure ML, or at least partially run Azure ML within Synapse. Of course, machine learning itself, you can build that in Spark using Python or R or Scala or .NET Spark. Or you can build in Azure Machine Learning your models, then export them using Onyx files, and import the model into Synapse dedicated SQL pools, and execute your machine learning models on top of SQL or inline in your SQL queries. So analysts can use data science or machine learning models just by typing SQL, which is quite handy. Before we go further on this, I will show you that this means Microsoft are covering quite a lot of the different components or boxes in our reference architecture. Let's take a look, though, at Synapse Studio. And Synapse Studio opens like this. You have your home, you can go to ingest, explore and analyze, as well as visualize. You can actually connect directly to Power BI here, but I'll come back to that. So if you go into your workspace, you will typically have, you will have your SQL databases. In this case, I only have a dedicated SQL pool running. And you can also have what they call a lake database. And the lake database is actually just a way to directly connect your Azure storage or your data lake and be able to build queries on top of it. To be honest, I've struggled a bit to get the lake database itself to run, because if I go in here and I browse, I can see all the different tables I have lying underneath, which are part of, let's see if we go a bit home, and I can go into my story accounts, container, and close analytics, and you will have Delta demo, and you will have, the employees isn't very populated. Let's go to yellow chip data. And you can see I have a lot of Parquet files here. This is a Delta Lake format, which is an open source format from Databricks. But what I can do then is, you can see here, I have yellow chip data. I can open this up, find the columns that are underneath, even though there's a whole bunch of Parquet files. I can open it up and I can query on it. Or I can query on this one. And if I use SQL scripts, it opens up a script into, just say select top 100 into your serverless SQL. However, for some reason, I can't get that to work today. So what you can do as well is, of course, on the trip data, open it up as a notebook and load to data frame. Of course, it always pauses so to save me money. So it's not running now, but you can then execute on top of that. And you can also typically do the same here. You can do new SQL scripts. Let's see, not new table. New SQL script, select the top 100. And you can execute. And of course, that didn't respond very. Oh, yeah, it's minimized. That's why. So you can query here across. And the cool thing is that when you are dealing with your data warehousing data, and you combine, for instance, with Azure Data Explorer here, you can query time series data on top of your data warehousing data, as well as your Delta Lakes or your Parquet files or your Avro files or what have you. You can build views, which then are exposed using serverless SQL, which then can be hit by users as a completely normal SQL table or SQL view for end users, even though, to be honest, the serverless SQL isn't all that great right now. It's a bit slow. It doesn't have any caching mechanism either, but it's still quite a handy feature. So in here as well, you can develop. This is where we are. We can develop scripts. You can integrate by creating pipelines, and you can monitor your pipeline runs and everything from here. And if you've been using Data Factory before, this is quite familiar. Microsoft is working hard on getting a unified look and feel on Data Factory, Synapse, Azure Machine Learning, so it's recognizable. And of course, everything here is run with IntelliSense as well, so it's quite easy. Right. So as you can see, it's quite a powerful tool in itself, even though it's a bit confusing because there are so many different versions and it's not quite mature yet, but it's getting there. They're putting a lot of effort into it. Right. So let's go to Power BI. And Power BI, most of you might know this already. It's a market-leading reporting and analytics tools. It's been around since 2015. It has data profiling. It is self-service BI and analytics. It has, of course, the modern reporting. You can even have paginated reports in here. Dashboards to combine all the different reports into a single dashboard for people. You do real-time reporting here, so you can, if you build in Synapse the Stream Analytics sync, you can have real-time data pushing into cold storage for cold analytics, as well as push a live stream. I think it stores or caches about an hour or so of data. So you can actually then build quite a nice dashboard on top of it for real-time needs, even though most times people ask for real-time reporting, they don't really need it. It just sounds cool. Oh, and additionally, Power BI in itself, behind the hood, you have the same engine that runs on analysis services, so Azure Analysis Services or Microsoft SQL Analysis Services, the tabular mode, which is the Vertipack engine, which means that you can build semantic models in Power BI without having to use Azure Analysis Services as another part of this. At least if you're using Power BI as your enterprise reporting tool, because I don't think Tableau or Qlik supports connections to Power BI models, but it's something that is quite open there at least. So again, let's enrich this reference architecture. And you can see that we have possibility to create custom AI solutions within Power BI. You can write scripts here. Aggregated facts. You have visualization, data exploration, and search. And of course, you have self-service BI, reporting and BI visualization. Then you have what was called Azure Purview, which is now rebranded into Microsoft 365 Purview. And the reason why they do this is because data governance is more than just Azure. And Purview has lots of functionality, so they decided to merge all the functionality that was in Purview with all the functionality that was part of Microsoft Information Protection, and just rename that to Purview instead. So Purview replaces Azure Data Catalog version 1. It is based on open standards, so it's based on Apache Atlas, which means that you have a rich set of REST APIs, which is quite good because Purview in itself, the scanner in itself, is quite expensive. So, and of course, it limits a bit what you can do with it. But when you're using these REST APIs instead, you have a lot of control. I mean, not complete control, but very, very strong control of what you create within Purview, whether it is data lineage or it is catalog, specific object name conventions, and so on. Purview also maps across the cloud environments as well as on-prem environments. So you can connect and scan S3 buckets in Amazon. It can connect to, I think it has a preview of Purview, of BigQuery, but I might be imagining things. But I know at least it also connects to GCP. And of course, you can connect to your on-prem data sources, whether that be Oracle, SAP, SQL Server, and so on. Then it has a business glossary, and business glossaries is a functionality to make the enterprise or the users have a common understanding of concepts and wording. And this is quite important because in companies, you might have different KPIs or different meanings for the same thing. So, or the same name for different meanings. For instance, passenger mix, what is that? Or what does sales per month actually mean? So these kind of business glossaries to explain out these things, details out these are important. You can also document KPIs, which again comes back to this KPI is calculated across the enterprise in this way. So sales per month is calculated by taking, for instance, just cost word minus sales amount is gross margin. Something. And you have data lineage. which is again specifically important in a compliancy setting, but it can also be important in an enterprise scope setting where you want to see from the dashboard back to the source what has happened for me to see this number now, what has been done with the sources to get to this result. So that's data lineage for you. It is also data security. So again, it marries into the Microsoft information protection, data loss prevention, making sure that you can tag data sources or data objects within your catalog and say that these are component sensitive. These are not to be allowed outside of Intune managed mobile phones or outside corporate laptops, or you can even attach scanners on common attack vectors. For instance, attackers tend to try to export data using specific tools or specific ports. So that means that you can put Purview as scanners on the exit ports and look for these common attack vectors and attack patterns, and then stop export of that data set through those. It also covers privacy, which means that you can build a set of classification rules and terms to scan the data state and pinpoint where you, for instance, see personal information such as credit card numbers, personal social security numbers, or names, and so forth. It also has access control, a rule engine, which means that instead of having to, you can still use Azure AD groups, but instead of having to go through the AD groups onto your storage account, onto SQL Server, and then control everything from there, you can do everything within Purview. At least that's the scope, but right now it's more on the terms of if you use Purview as the rule engine for access control, it means that you can grant, for instance, financial controllers access to certain data sets within Synapse. It doesn't work if you are letting them access the storage accounts or the SQL servers through other means than that, as far as I have seen. So, but it's quite a powerful tool if you're going for this full spectrum that I'm talking about. So what about master data, which is also a very important data governance tool? Well, Microsoft decided to partner with Profici, and Profici was the people behind Profici were the people who actually made the first SQL Server master data services. Then Microsoft bought them, and after they bungled that, or Microsoft bungled that, the people who were fed up, left, and formed Profici. So now they're partners there. And of course, it also integrates with other major providers if you want. What about data quality? Well, it's not there yet. It's on the wish list. Hopefully, we can see some data quality issues either at Ignite or maybe next year at Build. Which means now that we have all the basic foundations, we can see that also over the whole site here, you can have at least some of these boxes on the data trust side covered. One major obstacle right now, apart from that data quality is missing, is that data profiling is missing, which in my opinion is a bit of a pain point. If we go to Purview though, where did I hide that? Yeah, there it is. If I browse the assets by collection, my close catalog, and we can see, let's go into this one. Okay, so I can see where it is. I can see this hierarchy of it. I can see it tags geolocation because latitude, longitude on the set. It has a connection for me. I can go into properties. I can see whatever it's called. I can see the schema. And again, here you can see that it has the geolocation, drop-off latitude, longitude, and so on. But I can't browse it. I can open in Power BI Desktop, but that doesn't really help me. That takes a lot of time. I just want to see the top 10 samples here. And Azure Catalog version 1 had that, and I'm really missing it. But hopefully that will come soon. And of course, within here you have basic browsing of your sources. You can look into collections. Right now there's none. I can add role assignments. So right now it's just collection admins I've set up. You can add all others as well. And then you can go in and put in rule sets for how to scan what sources, pattern rules. Integration runtimes are used for connection to on-prem sources. There are some insights on the various assets I have. It isn't very interesting right now, but that might be a lot more interesting in a non-demo environment. And then you have the option of going into data policies and self-service access policies, which is quite new as well. It's in preview, which means that your users can go into the catalog, they browse for things, and they're not sure if it's there yet. But if they find a set, they can then ask for access to it using self-service. Instead of having to call somebody or send an email, they can actually just request, and there will be a guided pipeline to guide you through and get access on the other end. So it is still a bit immature, but it is getting there. And of course, if we look at, if we go to say data source sites, if you go to data factory, you can also see lineage on this. Let's see on the data. It's probably not very interesting, but it at least gives you some idea. So you can get an end-to-end lineage. It's still not quite good, but it's getting there. One thing I'm missing is that I can't find Power BI data lineage as part of this, so I can't see the dashboards that are built on top of it. But that is also something I know that they are working on. However, if I go into Power BI, I can go in here and get more information on the lineage of an end-to-end as well. So you can combine these two together. And one thing that is quite interesting within Power BI as well, apart from the lineage, is that you can do impact assessments, which means that you can go in and see, if I change a column here to something else, what reports or what workspaces and datasets will be affected by that. Third point on Synapse Power BI is the integration that you have on between Synapse and let's see, I think I haven't configured that one. I had an issue a month ago where I had to delete my entire Synapse workspace because of some challenges. Let's see if I can get it connected to Purview. And we'll start over again. Right, so it's connected. I need to publish this first, I think. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. And then if I go here, you can see now that I have the possibility of searching my workspace or searching Purview. And if I look for Purview, I can find the various data sources that were scanned and the assets here. The problem, of course, is that I can't, and this will open then a Purview linked window. But again, what I would love to see here is that I could actually get the opportunity to search for it and then open it for querying, again, data profiling that I was mentioning. It's not there yet. That's a bit of a shame. So we've seen all these, but it doesn't really end with that, because you have a very tight integration with Azure Machine Learning. And Azure Machine Learning is your low-code machine learning orchestration catalog, and API, all within, again, machine learning prospects. As I mentioned, it's a unified look and feel on things, and you can then export and import machine learning models. You have integration with Azure DevOps as well as GitHub. However, it is not as good as I would like it to be. It's very, very, very basic. And you can't really build any ML ops on or DevOps properly on this. In my opinion, it's still not quite there. And of course, you have Azure security and monitoring in place. So it gives you everything, which means that you get not only the middle layer, you get the green layer, and then you have the platform foundation or the cloud foundation, everything then built into giving you a full modern data platform using just one provider if you want to. I forgot to show you one thing, which was the integration with Power BI. And why is that suddenly not there? Okay, let's just... Man, it's because I'm on the wrong user. Ah, that's fine. Here we go. So I'll close this report and we'll start again. This means that for me running on a Mac, I can actually sit here and create data reports that are based on data sets in Power BI. So it's if we go into Power BI and we go into the data sets, you will see that demo MVP and lineage demo are then the ones that we can see when I go back to home. I get click here, and you can see here you have demo MVP and lineage demo. And because they are connected to the workspace, which is called demo, which is, if I go to workspaces, yeah, so it's this is the workspace I'm in. It's called demo here, but that's because that was what I called it. It's still connected to the MVP day. And I have two data sets I connect to. The problem, of course, is that means that I have to still have somebody to push or publish a data set into Power BI for me, because I can't do that from Synapse yet. Hopefully at some time we will see that it's possible, but right now you have to download or open up Power BI desktop, connect to whatever data sources you want within Synapse, build your data set, publish it to Power BI, and then it is available within Purview to within Synapse to then start browsing it. And of course, the demo gods failed me today, so there's, if I can't refresh, no, there's no data. There should be fields here for me to start building my report on, but it's not. But this is still quite a powerful tool, because that means that you can start bundle all the different things together. Hopefully, when you can go into start on Purview to build your data, to search for your data sets, and do that from Synapse, because you don't want to really have too many open windows to browse through. But go into here and search for whatever you need. Let's see if I can find something up. And of course it was... I've forgotten to refresh here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm on two different users, which is why I have some issues here. But you can go into, sit in your Synapse workspace as an analyst, go into Purview, search in Synapse, search for the dataset you want. You can access it apply for access if you don't have access. Then you can browse the data and see if it fits your needs. You can query it directly from within the workspace, combine it with other data sources that you have in your data lake or in your databases, and then push that into a report, a data set in Power BI, and publish it into Power BI. So that's the end-to-end scope. So without having to leave your preferred workspace, you can do everything you need within that. It's not quite there yet, but I know this is something that they are working hard on, getting everything to work and play nice together. Right, so I'm at the end of the talk. Do we have any questions?
Yes, actually we have a couple of questions here. So first question here is from Don McGimpsey. He says, I have noticed that most of the examples are based on schema-based tables, but can you also read JSON and HDFS data that may not be in a tabular format?
Yeah, let's just go back to to my admin user where I have full access. And if I go to linked, instead of, I was on my workspace, now I go to linked, then I have my storage accounts, and I can go into, here you can see you open up the Storage Explorer, and let's see, I have some, it's at least it's a CSV, but I think I have JSON here as well. Oh no, I don't have it right now, but it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's CSV or Parquet or Avro or JSON. You have a choice of either using SQL, but if you're using SQL to build that query, you will have to use the SQL JSON formatting, but it's doable in SQL. But then you can also use it into your Spark cluster and write Python or .NET Spark or Scala on top of it and do whatever you want to read it as well. So it doesn't matter which format it is, as long as you can query it in the language you know, you can do it.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a second question, which is also from Don McKinsey. He says, one pain point I had when setting up Purview is even to view data lineage in your own Power BI service data, you have to be an administrator on your system.
Yeah, and I think that's by design, for the simple reason these are systems, again, because Purview is no longer just the data catalog or data governance tool within Azure, it is an M365 security and governance tool. So it's meant to be for system administrators and not for analysts, basically. So, and I think that is by design that they have done it that way, even though it is a pain point if you just thought of using it as an analyst or lower level admin.
Okay. And then I also had a question here. So what if you're quite new, but I think this sounds really interesting. Where should you actually start to learn about these technologies?
Well, one thing you can do is Microsoft runs what they call Azure Immersion Workshops, which are free. It's half a day virtual training where you have to go through, and I do some of these myself. You have to go through 1.5 hours of more marketing, high-level presentation of what analytics services Microsoft offers, and then you do 3 hours of hands-on lab environments. So that's one solution to go through, or you can get hold of a trial account, which is also easy to get. It's $100 or 100 credits, I think, for a month. It's not a lot, but it gives you at least some playtime. Just make sure that you pause your Spark clusters and your SQL dedicated SQL pools as soon as you're done playing with them. That amount should last you for several hours of fun. And then you can use things like Channel 9, is it? Or, of course, global Azure recordings and all the YouTube recordings that are out there to play with it. So there is ton of free resources and guidance, and then you have the possibility to then play around with free tiers as well. And if you do have a company that sponsors you with Visual Studio accounts, you have from 50 to 110, 120 credits per month to play with. So yeah.
And then I also know that you're very active here in the community. So when can we see you presenting next?
Next, I will be in Poland for SQL Day. The session I'm running there will also be held on Hybrid User Group, which is on Meetup, Hybrid Data User Group, which is Introduction to Cloud Architect. So Cloud Adoption Framework, the data analytics scenarios. So that's the next place to find me.
Oh, nice. Well, don't think there are any more questions here, so I just have to thank you so much, Johan, for your presentation.
And whenever if people need to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, my hashtag on Twitter is intolerance or intolerance. So feel free to ping me whenever. It's no problem.
Yep, thank you. And also for our viewers, we are always very interested here in getting feedback. So if you want to give us some feedback, you can use this link that we show now to our Mentimeter, or you can scan the QR code that is always visible here in the left-hand section here of the screen. So we're coming up here for a break, a 15-minute break, and we'll be back at 8 o'clock sharp CET. And then we will have Heini Ilmarinen, who will present about how you can architect Azure Synapse Analytics. So I think with that, we can go over to the music.
That was a tricky one there. I got muted. That was not the plan. Yes, so hello everyone. I'm here. I'm back. If there are any new joiners, welcome to Global Azure Norway 2022. My name is Kristina Devochko and I am one of the organizers, one of the board members in Norwegian.net user group Oslo. So we are getting closer to the end of our day 2 and we have a last session up. So with this I would like to present our great speaker Heini Ilmarinen. Heini is a DevOps consultant at Polar Squad and she's actually a math teacher who turned Azure expert. This is pretty cool. With her background in mathematics and teaching, she has a great passion for problem solving, for simplifying complex things, and a unique approach to architectures. Heini is a data platform MVP as well, and is specializing in Azure infrastructure and the data platform. She has been working with customers large and small for the past several years to help them sort out their path to the cloud and make sense of their architecture, both hybrid and cloud. And she has worked extensively with both Azure infrastructure and analytics solutions and knows a thing or two about BMX bikes as well. So that's a cool fun fact. So Heini, this is a really exciting title for today's session. Can you tell us what are you going to share with us today?
Yes, so the session today is the ultimate jigsaw, architecting Azure Synapse Analytics. And the title definitely reflects how I think about my work every day. I feel
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm solving jigsaws all day long, puzzles, and trying to just find the best solution. It is trying to find the right pieces and make them fit together the right way. Yeah.
Sounds really exciting. So with no further ado, if you're ready, then take it away.
Yes, I definitely am. Thank you so much. So on to today's topic, the ultimate jigsaw, architecting Azure Synapse Analytics. And as I said, that is kind of one of the ways that I describe what I do in my daily work. I solve puzzles, I problem solve. And to me, Azure Synapse Analytics is one of the ultimate services to problem solve, because there is so many components and you need to figure out which ones of those you will use and also how you put those together. And especially also how you connect to other services that you might be using through Azure Synapse Analytics. So thinking back on where did Azure Synapse Analytics come from, it has already been over 2 years that it was announced at the, it must be 2019 Ignite, as this new and upcoming data platform solution on Azure where you can run all your data analytics and data platform needs that you might need. And at the time, I was so excited and I headed over on to the Azure portal and went digging for Azure Synapse Analytics. And I was like, I could find Azure Synapse Analytics, but actually when I put it up, what I got is the old Azure Data Warehouse. So they had announced this amazing Azure Synapse Analytics, but the old data warehouse was also branded into Synapse Analytics SQL. So we have come a long way from that. We do actually have this amazing new product in the Azure portal as well, called Azure Synapse Analytics. And you can easily find it if you go to the portal, you just type in Azure Synapse Analytics and create a new workspace. And what you end up is with quite many things. It's easy enough to get the service up, but then it might be a little difficult to figure out, like, well, what do I do next? What do I use to run my workloads? There's all these different terminology here that you need to figure out and know which ones to use. So to make sense of all this, we will start with an overview of Azure Synapse Analytics and figure out what are the different bits and pieces that you have available. Then we will look at how you secure Azure Synapse Analytics. Because also from the quite very beginning, of course, if you do some POCs, etc., you don't maybe need to care so much about security and networking and so forth. But when you realize this is something we want to move forward with, that is a topic we need to consider as well. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about how do we bring all this together? How do we find a solution that is the most suitable for your environment? And how do you choose the correct components? So I'm Heini Ilmarinen, and as it was so nicely put in my introduction, I'm a DevOps consultant at Polar Squad and a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I do some trainings around Azure as well. And my favorite topic is definitely architecture. And this particular session has so much architecture topics in it that it is one of my favorites. And I do have a mathematics background, so if anyone wants to talk math at any moment, just reach out and we can figure that out. But don't worry, no math in this particular session. And as you might have noticed, I'm a bit of a serial doodler as well. So let's get to it. Let's begin with the overview of Azure Synapse Analytics and what it's made of. And the nice thing here is that you might actually have a little bit of sense of this already if you joined the previous session by Johan. He was already talking a bit about Azure Synapse. And this way, I know that most of you will maybe have some general overview already, but we'll take the overview and then take the opportunity to start digging deeper right away. So if we think about Azure Synapse Analytics, the tricky thing is, as we saw in one of the screenshots, is that there is many different components to it. We saw that there's these pipelines, there's dedicated SQL pools, private endpoints, linked services, Spark pools, serverless SQL pools, and the list goes on and on and on. And so first of all, we need to figure out what are these services for. But before we go there, I actually want to take a step back and think about what are the stages of a data platform project. Where do you start? Well, first of all, we of course start from the data sources, because without some kind of data we want to work with, we're not even going to start a project. So we have some kind of data sources that we want to work with. And of course, as the first step, we want to take that data in and ingest it in some way. And once we have ingested it, we need to have a place to store that data as well. We need to put it somewhere so we can work further with it. In most cases, the data that we get in might need some further preparation, so some cleanup of the data, not maybe removing some irrelevant information, doing something to some not good quality data, for example, values missing, etc. We might need to do some of those tasks in this step. Once we have prepared the data, then we can start to do some transformations on this data. Because of course, we don't want to start to do transformations before we know that we have good quality data available. And as we go through these different stages, we need a place to store that data always after the stage that we go through. So we want to have the prepared and cleaned data stored somewhere. And then after the data is transformed, we also want to store it somewhere. And in most cases, after we have done the transformations that we want for our data, then we want to have these available somewhere to be served to our end users. And of course, the end users can be many things. It can be an application that reads that data. It can be visualizations in many cases. And we'll just today use the visualization phase as our example. But these can be also other data consumers like applications, or you might have some API definitions based on the data as well. So many options. But where does Azure Synapse Analytics fit in to all these stages? Azure Synapse Analytics is what we can use to actually cover all of these stages, all the way from the ingestion of data to preparation, transformation, serving, and even visualizing. And it starts to sound already like, well, I don't think we can use one tool for all of these stages. That kind of doesn't make sense. There isn't really like one specific tool that we can use for all of this. But within Azure Synapse Analytics, what then combines all of the different components that are available there is that we have the unified user interface that we can use. So the Azure Synapse Studio. And you saw some of that in action in the previous session if you joined that one. We also have unified monitoring We don't have to go to many different services in Azure to pull out monitoring data and figure out, for example, if there was an issue scenario that what went wrong. We can just find it in one place. And lastly, we also have unified management. So we can take care of networking, access control, all the different data sources that we're connecting to in one place. We don't have to, again, do this in many different locations. So those are the three things that unify all of this as we keep now digging deeper into the different components of Azure Synapse Analytics. Keep that in mind, that this is what kind of pulls it all together and is the glue that holds all these different components in a unified way. If we then look at the different components of Azure Synapse Analytics, we can think that there are kind of three different layers that we can find. And of course, the first layer that we need to be able to work with anything is the data layer. We need to have some place to store our data. Then, when we have that data, then we are able to have also this orchestration layer. So how is the data moved around from one place to another? And then we also need some analytic engines, because otherwise we won't be able to do very powerful transformations and really start to get the insights out of our data that we need. If we start from the data layer, this is where Azure Synapse Analytics will use an Azure data lake to store the data. And so when you create an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, you need to give a configuration of which Azure data lake storage you want to use. Or you can create a new Azure data lake storage account at the phase that you're creating your workspace at as well. So technically, the Azure data lake storage isn't part of the Azure Synapse Analytics, but it is required for it. So we can kind of think that it is very, very essential to it at least. And this is where what Azure Synapse Analytics will be using for many of the use cases that we do with it. When we look at the orchestration layer, this is where the Azure Synapse Analytics pipelines come in. And as you might have heard already in the previous session, this is the same capabilities that we have in Azure Data Factory. So if you've been working with Azure Data Factory, you will be able to take all those skills with you, and they will entirely translate to the pipelines in Azure Synapse Analytics. And actually, if you look at the Azure Synapse Analytics Studio, that graphical interface is very close to what the Azure Data Factory user interface looks like as well. So there's a lot of similarities to it, so it will help you to navigate around as well. The one thing to note is that not all capabilities that are in Azure Data Factory are available in the pipelines yet. But at least looking at the history, it looks like that whatever new capabilities are coming to Azure Data Factory, those then seem to come to the pipeline side of Azure Synapse Analytics as well. So those do develop somewhat to the same direction, but there are some differences as well. Next, if we look at the analytic engines, there is currently 3 categories available. So firstly, we have SQL pools. And within SQL pools, we actually have 2 different types. We have the first type, which is serverless SQL pools. And then we have the second type, which is dedicated SQL pools. And serverless SQL pools is not exactly a regular SQL database. It is more an engine that you can use to run on-demand queries. You can create some views and external tables, etc., but it isn't like a full-fledged database as Azure SQL or the dedicated SQL pools. The dedicated SQL pool side is actually what was the old Azure Data Warehouse service. So again, if you have worked in that service before, this will be very familiar with it. This leverages the multi-parallel processing engine behind the scenes and has that capability to really be powerful when you, for example, need to create star schemas and run data warehouse-like workloads in your environment. So these two are definitely for different kinds of scenarios, but on the other hand, also the pricing model is different. So for the serverless SQL pools, you pay per data that your query processes, whereas dedicated SQL pools, you give it a specific capacity that you want to use, and then there is a price for that capacity based on how much you have assigned. But you can scale up and down the dedicated SQL pools, and you can also stop it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that dedicated SQL pools will become very, very expensive. But of course, like if you have a ton load of data and you need to be running it all the time, that has a price tag to it as well. If we move on to the second category, that is the Apache Spark pools. So within Synapse Analytics Workspace, we also have Spark pools available. And that means that you can do similar things as you would do, for example, in Databricks. So you are, for example, able to run Python notebooks. And there are many other languages that are supported as well. And these Apache Spark pools are very much an integrated part within the Synapse Analytics Workspace. And there wasn't really a Microsoft equivalent of this service before Azure Synapse Analytics came out. So it is very much built into this service, kind of integrated fully. And then there is actually a new kind of pool that has come out quite recently, I would say. And this is the Data Explorer pools. And this is still in preview, so it's not, there might be still quite big changes coming to it in the coming days. But it has been brought into Azure Synapse Analytics Workspace for you to use as one of those analytics engines. And that uses the Gusto query language, and you can query your data. And it is looking like it's quite performant. But we will definitely have more experiences about it in the coming times as well, and how it particularly integrates with the Synapse Analytics Workspace side. So this very much gives you the overview of the different components that are available. But of course, we want to see how do these fit in our data platform stages that we just went through in the very beginning. So if we look at it, the orchestration, of course, kind of runs through all of those stages. We might be using the pipelines to ingest the data, even from outside of the Azure Synapse Analytics data sources. So there is a lot of connectors to other Azure data sources, as well as data sources outside of Azure as well. So we can use pipelines to ingest data from also other platforms than Azure. But we might also use pipelines to orchestrate the preparation stage or the transformation stage as well. So those kind of run through all of the stages here. And then as the analytic engines, you can, in most cases, use whatever pool you want. Not in all cases. But there are, of course, more suitable scenarios for these pools in certain cases than in others. But for the most part, you can do many similar things with these pools. So for example, you can do some ad hoc preparation and exploring with the serverless SQL pools. The dedicated SQL pools, you can do some transformations with it, but you can also use it for serving. And that is often what we might do if we're doing some visualization, to have our data in a star schema in the dedicated SQL pools. But we also have the Apache Spark pool side, and that we can use for preparation and transformation as well. And note that if you, for example, make a notebook on the Apache Spark pool sides, we can use that as one stage in our orchestration pipeline. So we can also orchestrate these different jobs that we have on the different engines. And then lastly, we have the Data Explorer pools, and those we can also use for the preparation and transformation stages, and somewhat to the serving as well. But on the serving layer, we need to be a little more accurate about what is it the purpose that we want to use the data for. If we are, for example, doing serving the data for an application that wants a relational database, then we need to have that kind of serving layer. So it depends on the use case. Of course, if we want to visualize our data as well, that is also possible with integration to Power BI. And it is not, again, it's not entirely like a component of Azure Synapse Analytics, but it is very easily integrated in there, and you can use it from the same Azure Synapse Analytics Studio as the other components as well. So that gives you a full overview of what the different pieces are and at what stages of the data process you might be using it. And this way we can now move on to securing Azure Synapse Analytics. And I want to specifically focus on two aspects today. And those two are firstly networking and secondly access control. And those are kind of the two major topics that we need to be able to tackle and decide on when we are kind of deciding on the architecture of how do we want to set up Azure Synapse Analytics. And there is quite many options and angles that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about these two topics. But to understand what do these really kind of cover, the networking side, we are really talking about things like, well, can I reach my destination? That is the first thing. And then if we can reach the destination, well, which route do we take there? Is there a particular way we want to get to that destination? And that's kind of just in general for networking, not specifically for Synapse Analytics in this case. On the access control side, what we're talking about is, can I get in once I have actually gotten to the destination? Can I get in and access that destination? And once I get in, then of course the question stands, well, can I do something, or what can I do? So those are kind of the questions and that we're trying to tackle in these two areas and trying to find the best way to do these. So let's start with the networking side. And with the networking, if we think about Azure services in general and also the Azure Synapse Analytics, there is actually, by default, if we don't change the default setting when we're putting this up, we get a public endpoint. And we do have some control over that public endpoint and what kind of traffic can get in and reach that. And we, for example, have firewall settings that we can set in whatever way that we see suitable. And this is really based on the history of Azure. So a lot of the past platform as a service services, which also Synapse Analytics is, they are meant to be reachable from anywhere. They are not meant to be in an internal network. There are also ways to put it in an internal network, but they were kind of first designed that there is this publicly reachable endpoint, and then you can control that endpoint in whatever way you need to. So in these firewall settings, what we can do is we can allow other Azure services to access this. And with this one, it's good to note that this doesn't discriminate between what Azure services are able to reach this endpoint. It just means allow Azure services. So it does open up quite a bit in the firewall settings, and you should consider carefully whether you want to allow this setting in your firewall settings. The other settings that we can put in is that we can whitelist IP addresses in there. So for example, I could block the firewall settings entirely, but then put in the organization public IP to the IP whitelist and just have traffic allowed from that IP address. If this is not fulfilling the requirements that might, for example, come from the security people in your organization, there are other options. So this is not the only way forward. And what then comes in is a concept of managed workspace VNets. And here you get a virtual network that is managed by the workspace itself. It means that you do not need to configure any kind of IP address spaces for that VNet. You don't have to configure route tables or anything like that. That is entirely managed for you. So it does make the setup very, very easy and fast. It's just one tick. You just choose, I want to use a managed workspace VNet, and you're good to go. One thing to note here is, as I mentioned, the Spark Pool side is fully integrated into Azure Synapse Analytics Workspace. But actually, the dedicated SQL pools and the serverless SQL pool side is running on the multi-tenant infrastructure, which means that to connect to those, what you need to actually set up is private endpoints, or more accurately, actually managed private endpoints. There is a concept of private endpoints also, outside of the managed workspace VNets. So we kind of distinguish between these two by saying managed private endpoints. And again, these are managed by the workspace itself. You do need to say that, hey, I want to create a private endpoint to this service, and then those get created. Before, these did not get created automatically, but at the current time, when you're setting up your workspace with a managed workspace VNet, these do get created automatically for you for the serverless SQL pool. And then if you do create a dedicated SQL pool, you also get that endpoint automatically. But if you would like to connect to any other Azure services, for example, you want to move data with your pipeline from a regular Azure SQL, you would need to create a managed private endpoint for that one as well. So just keep that in mind, that once you do have the virtual network in place, then you need to be creating these managed private endpoints for whatever data source or destination you want to use. So this handles the kind of the service side of these components that are within the workspace, but we still have this public endpoint for the web UI at this point. And if we also want to secure that, we do need to get into a little bit of a more complex scenario. And what we need to bring in, for example, we might have our separate virtual network that we have created ourselves in Azure, and we just want to allow traffic from that VNet to the Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. What we are going to need in this case is a Synapse Private Link Hub, and that is what allows us to secure the traffic between the Synapse Private Link Hub and this public endpoint. And in that way, we are able to have a private endpoint in our virtual network that is then connected through this Synapse Private Link Hub to our Synapse workspace. And through this Private Link Hub, you're actually able to have multiple workspaces connected. You do not have to have separate ones for different ones. If you happen to have several in your organization, you can just have one and connect through that particular one. And this definitely gives us more flexibility in how we want to connect, or how we can connect to the workspace. We can then, for example, connect from our on-premise networks, etc. But we'll take a closer look at that when we talk about a sample use case in the end. But what you can see here, the setup does get a little bit more complicated. To put up a Azure Synapse Analytics workspace with the default values doesn't take a lot of time. But once you start to put in these requirements about networking, etc., it does get more complex, and there's more components to manage and make sure that they are working together as they should. All right, that's it for networking. And that means that we're going to move on to access control. And when you're creating an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, you kind of run into this thing that you need to take into consideration access control from the very get-go. It gives this message that, do you want to assign yourself to the storage blob data contributor role on the data lake storage that you choose when you create this? And also it tells you that, well, you will need to give users other kinds of access as well when you move forward. So you kind of get a hint right away that, well, there's some complexity to this. It's not just that you put everything up and you give some roles to people and you're good to go. So if we look at the workspace, we have two levels of access. We have the Azure RBAC roles, and then we have Azure Synapse Workspace roles as well. And we need to take into consideration both of these roles as well. And actually the Synapse Workspace roles, these are now in the documentation called Synapse RBAC, so you will find it with that when you're searching for it. So if we start from the Azure RBAC side, what this is influencing is, for example, how you create your resources. And we kind of have three major or kind of general roles. The first one is an owner, and this user can do anything with Azure resources plus give other users access. Then there is a contributor role that allows you to manage Azure resources in whatever way you need, but doesn't allow you to give access to other users or groups or applications even. And then lastly, there is a reader, which, as the name might imply, just gives you access to be able to view your resources. So it doesn't really give the right to manage those or change those in any way. So what these apply to is that within your Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, these, for example, allow you to create these different kinds of pools that we have been talking about. So really, it is focusing on the management operations. Are you able to create these? Are you able to modify these? Are you able to start and stop these, etc.? And for example, create the networking aspects and so forth. But this is just for creating and management of these resource components. This doesn't really give us yet any access within the Azure Synapse workspace itself. So we also need this Synapse RBAC side to this as well. And if we look at these roles, there are three default roles at the moment. There's the workspace admins, Spark admins, and SQL admins. And these names are quite descriptive. So the workspace admin, what it gets access to is that it is able to configure the pipelines as well as do development on both the SQL and Spark side. Then the Spark admin is restricted to doing development on the Spark side. And then if we look at the SQL admins, they are able to do development on the SQL side. And there is a little more detail to these different roles. So you might want to look into these and then figure out which users need what kind of access. And always remember that it is better to leverage groups when assigning these access so that you have groups for each of these different roles. And then you put users in these groups and then assign these groups to the specific roles. All right. So we've been going through first the different components of Azure Synapse Analytics, and then we looked at the security aspect of Azure Synapse Analytics from the point of networking, and then also from the point of view of access control. And the question stands, well, how do we use this? Especially if you're thinking about, well, I want to start using Azure Synapse Analytics in our organization. How do you figure out which ones of these components to use? And then also on the other hand, well, which networking option do you go with? You need to evaluate these different options and find what works the best for in your use case. So how we would go about that is, of course, we first need to kind of figure out what is our scenario. And we're going to walk through one kind of scenario in this last portion of this presentation. So we are going to have a sample scenario where we have a lot of source data. We have it both from software as service applications and also in our internal network, some business applications from where we want to get data onto our platform. And this might already imply that in our data sources, there might be quite many types of data. So for example, we might have some relational databases, then some semi-structured data like JSON and XML and so forth. And we might even have some non-structured data as well. So these data sources can be very varied, and we might need to handle these in different ways. Then what we want to do with this data is, in this case, we want to do some reporting and just get visualizations of our data. We want to do just some exploration and figure out what our data even contains. And we really want to start working towards doing some data science on this data as well. And then we do have to think about the people side as well. So we need to think about, well, do we have one team working on this solution or do we have many teams? And we should also consider their skill sets. What tools have they used previously? And because that will affect also what kind of tools we want to be using in this platform solution moving forward too. So if we start thinking about, well, what kind of components would we want to use from the Azure Synapse Analytics workspace? Well, we have our data sources, which in this case are varied. We know that for the storage layer, we will have the Azure Data Lake storage behind the scenes, but then pretty much everything else we need to figure out, what do we want to use for that? So for the ingestion phase, we might want to start using pipelines in the beginning. So pipeline is really good when you need to do periodic movement of data from one place to another. If we would start to have some kind of streaming data coming in, pipelines might not be the best option for that, and you might want to look at other options for doing that. So pipelines is not really optimized for that case. So keep that in mind. And also note that actually when you create your Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, when you begin, what you have is the Azure Data Lake storage, but you also get pipelines out of the box. And as a third phase, you also get the serverless SQL pools. And you should definitely use that in your solution as well. It is really fitting for when you, for example, want to do just some exploration of your data, for example, from your Azure Data Lake storage. So you would, for example, grab some of your raw data with creating just some copy pipelines that put it into your Azure Data Lake storage, and then you would run some queries in the serverless SQL pool just to get an idea of what kind of data you have and what kind of preparations and transformations you would like to start doing from it. So this is a really good way to get started, and it is kind of implying that even if you just want to start really small, you can. These are the components you start with whenever you create a workspace, and you can get quite far with this already with your solution. So it's a kind of easy way to get started in a fast manner. But we do have other goals in mind as well that the serverless SQL pool doesn't quite fulfill for our scenario. So, for example, to start moving more towards the side of, well, we want to transform this data for our data, kind of with those data science needs in mind. And if we kind of recognize in our organization that we have, for example, people who have been using Spark before, and all the good tooling that we have available for even machine learning on that side, the logical thing would be to then use the Apache Spark pools for transformations and so forth. But then if we are doing visualization, and this visualization is very kind of data warehouse type of workloads where you need to look a lot to the history and be able to really filter by those different dimensions, like what kind of products you have sold and how many over a specific time frame, it is a really good place for the dedicated SQL pools and having that full-fledged data warehouse side included as well. And then, of course, when we want to visualize that, Power BI comes as quite a natural choice at that point. So from this, you can kind of see that you can either use just a few components from Azure Synapse Analytics, or you can kind of go all out to all of the components that are available there. And remember that you can always adjust this as you go along as well. Even if you start with something, you can stop using it at a later point, or even if you start with just 2 components, you can keep adding other services to it as well moving forward. But this is just the first aspect of figuring out what does your solution look like. Choosing the specific components that you want to use. But we do need to think about the networking, and we need to think about also the access control. So if we take this a step further and see that, well, we remember from the portion of networking that we were going through that, hey, we have this managed VNet that we can use if we want to really secure our resources. And then if we want to also have the web UI secured, we need to use this Synapse Private Link Hub. And what this enables us to do, for example, in this scenario, we had some on-premise data sources as well. And if we really want to be able to connect to those securely, we need all this networking in place. plus particularly if we want to be able to securely connect to this web UI. So for example, we can have our organization networks connected with a VPN to our own virtual network in Azure that is then linked with this Synapse Private Link Hub. So this kind of makes the entire networking side secure so that it is not traversing over the internet. And of course, in our organization network, we can have our users that are then the ones that will, for example, use this studio and then run queries in the serverless SQL pools, for example, and just do different things in the workspace resources themselves. But then if we also think about the role side, we have different levels of users that we need to accommodate. So for example, for these users that are actually working with the role services within the Azure Synapse Analytics workspace, we want to use the Synapse RBAC roles. And then on the other hand, when we might have, for example, a separate operations team that is responsible for the infrastructure and networking and so forth, this would be the team that then gets these Azure RBAC roles. And note that it might even make sense to give these users that mainly work in the Synapse Studio, it might make sense to give them some reader rights to the Azure resources as well, so that they are able to see what's there. And if an issue comes up, they can at least kind of check if anything pops to the eye that something is wrong. They don't right away have to just call the operations team and open a ticket and say, hey, something is wrong, and pass it on, but they can actually check themselves if they can find something very obvious right away, since they've been working with it. So it can make any problem solving when something goes wrong much easier to work with. All right, so as we see, there is the aspect of choosing the correct services, but then also the aspect of we need to figure out how to set the rest of the architecture as well, because the networking affects how the different components talk to each other, and then the access control affects how the users are able to use these services, and really then able to work with the data in an efficient but also in a secure way. So we walked through the overview of Azure Synapse Analytics and the different components and what each of these are for. Then we looked at securing Azure Synapse Analytics and specifically at the networking and access control side. And lastly, we looked at how to use Azure Synapse Analytics. So really, how do we bring these two previous themes together so that we get a full solution for ourselves? But what should you do with this if you want to get started? Well, first, you need to figure out your use case. What are you trying to do? What's your environment like? What are your users like? What kind of skills do they have? And what kind of things do you need to do with this platform? That is the first step to figure out. After you have figured that out, then you are, of course, able to choose the services that you need, but then also plan the rest of your architecture. And you often need to take into considerations then any organizational requirements that might come in about security and networking and so forth. And then lastly, you just need to take the first step. For the most part, when you start with Azure Synapse Analytics, you are able to expand it as you go along. But do note that the networking aspect you should plan out from the very get-go and figure out which model you want to take, because you cannot still change that once you have chosen it. So make sure you just get going, start with the first step, and get going with your data. And that is the way that you are really able to bring your data to life. And that is how you will be able to get the insights that will then help you run your business in a better way. So thank you so much for joining. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me both on Twitter and LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out and send any messages that you might have after the fact as well. And I hope you really learned something from this session.
All right, thank you so much, Heini. That was quite a jigsaw. No
Yes.
more words needed. You need
Exactly.
to think about quite many bits and pieces in order to ensure that you have covered all the potential use cases. So
Exactly.
I learned something new as well. So thank you so much for
Excellent.
this great session, and I loved the design of your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
It's
Thank you.
something you don't see every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my favorite thing to figure out things. I grab a paper and I draw on it, and yeah, so I decided to bring it to my presentations as well.
Really cool. Yes, shall we see if we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, that would be great.
I don't see any questions as of
Hmm.
now,
All right.
but there is a great feedback here from how do you say, from behind the curtains, from other organizers about this being a great talk, and I can
Great,
agree
thank
to
you.
that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time and being part of Global Azure Norway, Heini. In case you still have any questions, just add them in the chat and we will follow them up afterwards.
Yes, sounds good.
And other than that, I would like to wish you a great rest of the day and
Thank you.
great.
You too, and thank you for
Yeah.
having me. It was really a pleasure.
It was great having you here, and thanks again for a great session. And for the rest of the participants, please take a few minutes to let us know how we're doing and what you think about Global Azure Norway. Now you can see a link to the survey on the screen, and once it disappears, there is still a QR code out there that you can scan. So thank you, everyone. It's time to round up Global Azure Norway for this year, but we are already looking forward to starting it out again in 2023. So thank you so much, everyone. Have an amazing rest of the week, and we talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.